All right, welcome into the Maple Leafs Post-Mortem episode. Jon and I, as usual, we're getting together to discuss exactly what you think. It's one of those dearly beloved, we're gathered here today type situations because, yeah, the poor Leafs, those poor Maple Leafs, those hardworking, overpaid Leafs, they did not make it, Jon. They did not make the playoffs. We just sat and watched a five games qualifying round against a wonderfully skilled Columbus Blue Jackets team, defensive and everything, but bookended by two unreal Korpisalo shutouts in Game 1 and Game 5 that really iced the Leafs. And when it all comes down to it, I mean, there was a big press conference on Wednesday that, we're trying to address some issues here, but I didn't hear what I really wanted to hear. So I think today we're just going to discuss essentially what happened in that 5-game series. The bubble, it's crazy that both hosts are out. They didn't make the playoffs, both Edmonton and Toronto hosting this major tournament, and they're both out before the playoffs even really begin. But we want to talk about how that 5-game series went down. And then, of course, all those different hot takes that we've heard circulating throughout the week. Maybe get a handle on some of them and give our own thoughts and opinions. But in the end, Jon, it's not a super exciting pod. It's more of a somber one, but it's one that you could have seen coming. I'll let you step in and take over. But I think it's one you could have seen coming, don't you think?
Um, well, I mean, we were very optimistic after game two. Game one was interesting. The offense didn't show up at all. Game two. It's funny that we're going all the way back, and it's been so long. We're going all the way back to game two of the play-ins. And the Leafs had played a good game. Then game three happened, and they were down going into game four, and we had that 3 minutes of like heart attack inducing offense that happened at the end of game four. Fast forward to game five, and the offense completely disappeared. So we realized that there's one of two things happening here. Either the Maple Leafs forgot how to put the puck in the net, or Joonas Korpisalo is the real deal. And when we look at the 3 games that he played in the series, it seems like it's the latter as opposed to the former.
You think he's there's a reason he's the MVP? You're calling him the thief of the series, coming down to that 2% the Leafs shot, right? We keep talking about that all week
Well,
long.
no, I understand. I understand that you have to put more pucks in the net, but you want to count John Tavares hitting the post almost as many times as the Leafs lottery ball. But I think it comes down to a better goaltender. Yeah, Freddie Andersen, he's no slack in net, but Joonas Korpisalo, he was behind Sergei Bobrovsky for years. He is obviously talented himself. The Blue Jackets knew that. We now know that, and we especially know that after the 5 overtime 85 save performance he put on.
In Game
So
1
all
there.
I have to say is yes, there is a lot of blame to be placed around, and we will talk about that. But let's not discount the Columbus Blue Jackets and how outstanding that defense and that goaltender is.
Well, Jon, if I can just jump in here, I think in the end it sounds like, and I think Twitter would say this too, especially Maple Leafs Twitter, Joonas Korpisalo knows how to come up with a big win in a big game, and apparently our goaltender doesn't know how to. Whether that's the core, the defensive core, or the yips, right? Maybe it's his ability to kind of handle himself in big pressure moments. I don't buy into that one, but Korpisalo was able to get a big win, a couple of them in the series, in big moments, big saves when it's important. So again, kind of highlighting what the theme will be in this podcast going forward. I think you're right. He was the MVP of the series, and he was able to in a 1v1, him v Freddie Andersen, he was better in every single start. Every single time he came in the net, he was better than Freddie. So again, one of my favorite Leafs of all time. I'm 26 years old, so I can remember Curtis Joseph and Ed Belfour. And I got to throw Freddie Andersen in a group of 3 of the best goaltenders I've ever seen in a Maple Leaf uniform. But he wasn't good enough in this series. That's the bottom line. So that's kind of where I'm glad you started it off that way, because number one, the storyline in Maple Leafs Nation is there's one year left on Freddie's contract, and do you move on from him? Now, as much as I'm sitting here, there's a Freddie Andersen jersey right there hanging up. I'm understanding what everybody says, and I kind of buy into it. If he's going to be north of 30, and aside from the Vezina trophies, on the same kind of track record as Bobrovsky, I doubt the Leafs are going to move on or are going to keep him. I think they're going to end up moving on from him, but we're going to have to give him all that, it's coming up later on, all the credit that's due for Freddie Andersen, the way that he's just championed this team to 3-4 straight playoff series. And then, of course, not been able to get it done. The stats show not been able to get it done in the big games. So what's your take on Freddie, man? I know we're both big fans of him, so let's get into it.
Well, I mean, I agree with a lot of what is being said post the post game. So for like a day and a half, all of Leafs Nation was completely insane,
Oh yeah.
saying that Freddie had to go and Mitch Marner needed to be traded, and it was just, I guess it was like sickness from being eliminated when you thought that you were going on and underestimating a Columbus Blue Jackets team, thinking that they weren't worthy of facing the Leafs, when in actuality, they're a much better built team than the Toronto Maple Leafs. That being said, moving on from that, there's no way this team needs to move on from Frederik Andersen. It would be completely insane to do that. These guys, it's been said, these guys do not grow on trees. You do not know what Jack Campbell is. You do not know what Ian Scott is. You do not know what the goaltending pipeline is like in Toronto. You don't know if you have the next Tuukka Rask or if you've got the next Justin Pogge down there. You know what you do know you have? You've got Frederik goddamn Andersen, number 30 in net, and he's stealing the game most nights. For like we were talking about the play-ins, you're talking about games 1 and 2. You're talking about Korpisalo being better. Well, he was better by maybe 1 or 2% in those 2 games. It was both shutouts. We're talking about like a sliver of percentage that Korpisalo was better than Frederik Andersen. And you know why? It's because the Columbus Blue Jackets have a defensive core and the Toronto Maple Leafs have a bunch of wingers playing defense.
It goes back to a conversation we had, you and I, this week, where you pointed out some of these teams that are kind of goalie factories. Columbus now is considered one of them. When you put yourself in the shoes of a fan in last offseason, when Bobrovsky, not just the forwards that disappear, but when Bobrovsky leaves, and you've got 2 unknowns in Merzlikins and Korpisalo, although you've seen flashes of them and you can see where they might have some potential, you don't know. And you mentioned, like, they're another team that's kind of like Nashville is a defensive factory. They're a goalie factory, and I started thinking to myself, you cracked open a little something in my brain that, well, Nashville's kind of a goalie factory too, because no matter what, if it's not Pecorine, it's Saros, and I can guarantee you there's somebody else in the pipeline that's bigger and just as good as Saros, and they'll be fine when Rene gets moved on from. Like, as an aside, he didn't see ice time this entire qualifier. They went with Saros every single game. So it shows you, like Lundqvist, how team's going to have to move on from their big studs eventually, right? But my point is, there are other teams in the league that you can look at and go, holy smokes, they are goaltending factories. And one of my major points is when you look at Devin Dubnyk, you reverse to, what was it, 7 or 8 years ago now, when he was on his last legs in Edmonton, a very poorly defensive team, basically Toronto West, which everybody can agree, they've got offense, they have for a decade, and they can't make the playoffs because defense wins championships in every sport. Pitching, in football, in basketball, look at the way the Raptors are playing right now. Shout out to the shirt. So defense wins championships. And Edmonton, Toronto, very similar. You saw the way Devin Dubnyk way back when their issues were still prevalent, and he literally couldn't make a save. And look at Devin Dubnyk now. He's one of the best goalies, most consistent goalies on a team. Minnesota has consistently, year after year, been a good defensive team, right? Defense first. No real superstars, but a good defensive, hardworking team. Look at where they are right now. I mean, they don't look perfect, but that's the thing. It's a combination of what have you done for me lately, but you kind of think, wait a second, if some of these teams are defensive and goaltending factories, do they not have maybe a link? Does something not kind of go hand in hand? And I think I use Dubnyk because it highlights where you can go from one team to another. Now, that was a while ago, but look at how he's never faltered since he ended up on a team that can play. Like, he's shown exactly what he can do night in and night out. And I think just to tie it all back into Freddie Andersen, you can lay a lot at his feet. The stats shows he's 0-8, I believe, now in elimination games, or where his team is facing
The team is 0-8 in
exactly,
elimination games,
exactly.
not Frederik Andersen.
But
the team.
you're so correct. But this is the thing, just to appeal to every Twitter fan and Freddie hater, it feels like, out there, guys who love to just pile on the goalie, they do use the stat. Here's Freddie Andersen's specific stats in elimination games, right? Or games where the team can move on, things like that. And he's actually 0-8. So anybody who wants a little bit of fuel to the fire or a little bit of ammunition that's already kind of willing to shake it up and happy to see what they could do with Jack Campbell, I'm so sorry, but like if Kyle Dubas is going to listen to you, and if he's going to actually move on from Freddie in a year, which he really might do, Think about Bobrovsky, right? He really might not have the money to pay for Freddie, and he's going to look at Campbell and X, Y, or Z in the pipeline. And you think this Toronto defensive core can handle that? This is the whole point. Freddie Andersen has carried this team for 4 straight years now into the playoffs with their defensive inconsistencies. It's allowed Dubas to kind of keep the foot on the gas in his mentality. But you're seeing now, after another loss, the fan base and media and myself included is sitting here going, okay, you're trying to prove something and it's not working, right? He's trying to prove a certain style of hockey, but Freddie's kind of given him that luxury over years. So, man, a lot of points there. But again, what I'm trying to say is some teams that are defense or goaltending factories, maybe look into how that link, it really makes a lot of sense. Where the goaltender, you brought up Martin Brodeur in the past, right? A totally different era of hockey, but one of the best goaltenders of all time had to face how many significant chances a night?
A Hall of Famer because of the defense. I'm sorry, I love Marty, and he deserves to have the trophies he has, and he showed through his youth, growing up, playing through the system and becoming a top draft pick,
Yeah,
that he was
all
an
star.
outstanding talent. But Hall of Famer because of the guys who played in front of him,
And
able
the
to play in the style he played, in the diving and stand up style and the scramble
everything.
style that he played, because his defenseman Scott Niedermayer, let's not forget, was right there for a majority of the time clearing the puck out of the blue. So
To give Martin his credit as well, he was literally the third defenseman on that team. So the defense had an ability to kind of he was the best puck playing goalie of all time, right? And the way he would come out behind his net, that trapezoid roll is essentially kind of Marty brought that in. The
yeah.
way that he plays or her played, the defense didn't even have to kind of come that far in their own zone because they knew he could play the puck so well. So again, as much as you say, well, a lot of that had to do with the defense, like the defense was able to play a certain way because of how good he was at playing the puck as well. So that conversation goes over and over and over. But to get back to my point, if Dubas is going to listen to anybody on Twitter who buys into the cherry pick stats of Freddie can't make a save in a big game, which is also a false narrative. That's just something you make up to sound cool on the radio. And I love how people just kind of buy into that on Twitter and they keep regurgitating it over and over. But if Kyle ever buys into what's going on there and he has to rely on Campbell and X, Y, and Z, he's going to have to fix the defensive core first. So the conversation about goaltending, it doesn't happen. If you're really picking that low-hanging fruit and throwing the blame at the door of Freddie Andersen or throwing it at the feet of Freddie, like, again, I think I've said enough. It's a very long, drawn-out point. I'm picking from here and here and here, but there's a point here. If you're not good defensively, you're going to sink. You're not going to swim whatsoever, regardless of the goaltender. You put Carey Price in a Maple Leaf jersey, and nobody's gonna appreciate the one or two big saves he makes in a 4-3 loss. It's not happening.
Okay, so I got a few things here. And I want to make sure I collect my thoughts so I don't forget them. First things first, anybody who wants to pick Frederik Andersen's stats out for the 0-8 elimination games, can you please go back and show me what the number one D pairing stats were for those games, what the number one line was stats for those games, and what the number two line stats were those games, please and thank you. Because if you want to go and do the back research on the goaltender, go ahead and do the research on the core of the entire team. He's part of the core, the first line, the first D pairing. At least I need those stats if you're going to go ahead and throw that at me. So go until you do that for me. I don't want to hear no more Freddie Andersen 0-8 in elimination games. Not talking specifically to you, Ryan. I'm talking to the entire Twitter world. Don't bring it at me unless you got more to back it up, unless you're proving to me that the Toronto Maple Leafs are actually providing enough offense and providing enough defense for Frederik Andersen, and he's the one shitting the bed every time. Go shut your mouths and put it to sleep. On the other side of it, the defense and goalie factories, the reason, or I guess the philosophy on these teams, it's different than the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we know that because the Leafs aren't in the playoffs and these other teams are. But what I mean is the Leafs drafting philosophy was obviously offensive. You look at the William Nylanders, Mitch Marner, Kasperi Kapanen, Andreas Johnsson, Jeremy Bracco, Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Morgan Riley, all these players drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs, they all have an offensive flair to them, and they don't look for the kind of players that these other teams are looking for. They're not looking for the goaltenders in the draft. They're not looking for the defensemen, and that's why the Minnesotas and the Nashvilles of the world are able to do this, is because other teams, mainly the Toronto Maple Leafs and I guess the Edmonton Oilers, aren't paying attention to these guys in the draft. They're trying to build their team around another way, and it's a flawed philosophy. So in my opinion, you will see less offense on these goalie and defense factories, and you'll see less defense and goaltending on these offensive factories.
I hear you there, and again, to me it just comes down to, like, you take some of these teams that again have been known year after year, even an expansion team like the Vegas Golden Knights.
Oh,
Do
can we
not
stop for a second and just
go
say
for it.
how awesome the Vegas Golden Knights are and how
Yeah.
completely unexpected. We had a conversation today, and I completely agree with you. The Seattle Kraken are going to be the contrast to this. Are they going to be as successful as the
No.
Vegas Golden Knights, or are we going to see the actuality of what an expansion franchise could or should be? Vegas is obviously the best case scenario in this situation
I think
and
so.
took massive advantage of their situation. But I can't wait to see what Seattle does, because that will contrast. We will have two teams to play against each other, and after year one, it'll be interesting to see if the Seattle Kraken can have at least a taste of the success the Vegas Golden Knights had.
Yeah, they set a standard. And I said to you before, like, I'm no expert. I can't recall every single move that was public about what kind of went on in the backdrop there. But McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon, like the moves that they made, I doubt those will be replicated by a team like Seattle. I
I
doubt they'll
think
be
that's
able to.
illegal now.
There you go. So, and getting back to my point about Freddie, before we get too sidetracked too, I was going to say, imagine some of these teams like a Vegas or a Nashville who, within a year, when Anderson's contract is up, may actually have the cap space. Think Arena will be off the cap. Vegas, you won't know what's going on with Laner. Fleury will probably be gone as well. You're talking about teams that are defensively aware and could sign a guy like Freddie Anderson. Now, again, the jersey's right there. One of my favorite players of all time. Okay, I'm not afraid to show my bias, but imagine looking at that guy in one of those jerseys and tell me that he's not one of the best players. Like he's top 10 on a Maple Leaf team. And we've said this year after year about goalies that were worse than Freddie, about Reimer. Oh, by the way, that's another team I was talking about. Mrazek and Reimer, they're not great goaltenders, but look at the wins they come up with. You want to know why? Because they make 1 or 2 10-bell saves, not 14 in a game. And of the 14, we don't say, oh, that one Liam Foudy goal, that ruined it for us. Our series is done. Thanks a lot, Reimer or Mrazek. Like, it doesn't work that way in other markets. But apparently Freddie just he's the problem here, right? So imagine
Yeah.
him in one of those two jerseys on a team like Nashville, like Vegas, a team that's a contender and that plays defensive and will have cap space when the Leafs won't be able to afford Freddie Anderson. So I'm telling you, I said it on Twitter to a guy who I was getting a little aggressive, but I'll be honest, the Leafs had just lost their season. So the tempers were flaring a bit, but I stick to my guns here. These guys don't grow on trees. So, you know, enjoy him while he's here. And this is the exact reason why Toronto doesn't deserve nice things. It's
Yeah, so you talk about what it would be like to see Frederik Andersen in these other jerseys, and we could talk about a rumor that has hit the rumor mill since the end of the play-in round. How disgusting would it be? Would it be to see, as words are easy for me, would it be to see Anderson in the black and gold of Pittsburgh?
gross.
Because
Gross.
there has been Murray for Anderson rumors, and I don't want any piece of that. Can I just tell you that, for one, because I am not a fan of Matt Murray. I do not like the way he plays. I do not like his confidence. I don't like anything about Matt Murray. I get that he's got Stanley Cups. He took advantage of a really good team, and he gave them just enough of what they needed. And he took advantage of having Marc-Andre Fleury for one of those cups as well. So I don't want any part of Matt Murray, but it would be disgusting to see Frederik Andersen play for Pittsburgh, because I know exactly how well he would do for Pittsburgh. And he would probably, just like I said when Phil Kessel went to Pittsburgh, I said Phil Kessel's got 2 rings in Pittsburgh. And what happened? He got them. So it would happen for Freddie too. He would raise the water level in Pittsburgh so high, and the defense would keep him protected. Like you said, Frederik Andersen has to make 10 bell saves to steal the game, but James Reimer has to make 3.
John, I don't know who you're
Get the
trying to
defense
kid.
better.
I don't know who you're trying to kid.
Like,
Freddie Anderson would not be able to win a big game in Pittsburgh.
oh, whatever.
I'm just saying, he doesn't win big games.
Yeah,
He himself cannot
yeah.
get it done in a big moment. That Liam Foudy goal would happen all over again. Poor Martin Marinson. I do want to say, because that goal is imprinted
The
in my
whole
brain.
team changed on that goal, by the way. Can we
Exactly.
just see that? How the whole and okay, so the Foodie is in the corner below the goal line, all
Yes.
right, and the entire team. Where do you think the goaltender is, by the way, when someone is below the goal line? Is he not deep inside the net,
Okay, but let me
cutting off
stop
the
you, because
post?
you are correct. You are correct. But here's the thing. Martin Marinson, love him to death for hating him so much. You know what I mean? Like, we'll just sit here and pick on him until the end of time. When you're playing defense on a 2-on-1, you have to commit to something. And you know what he did, man? I'm still picturing it. He stood there in front of Freddie and put his stick down on the ice. And you know what that does? it basically screws Freddie. It does, because the guy's
Well, it
now
gives him
got
a
to go.
tip, right?
The guy's also got to go. Wait a second. Do I take the shot or the pass? Because you putting your stick down right there is doing nothing. The guy's like at the top of the hash marks in the slot. Like it was the most confusing thing to me. And then I remembered instantly, that's right. Regardless of who changed or whatever, there was one guy back, and I expected him to do something, and he did nothing. But it's Martin Marincin. You know what I mean? But it comes down to, oh, Freddie can't make a big save right there. It's like, guys, we relied on, with Muzzin out, albeit, we relied on Martin Marincin in that moment to commit to anybody. You know what he could have done? And I'm just to further my point, he could have gone at Foudy and made Foudy make the pass. But guess what? Freddie's got one option. Okay, there's a pass. Like, Foudy's not shooting, so he can just immediately start to cut off the shot. But instead, or Marincin could have gone to whoever scored the goal and let Foudy walk in, and then we can say, okay, it's up to Freddie to take the one-on-one there. But you know what happened? There was two options, and Foudy made the less likely one and scored on it. But Freddie's got to honor both options because Martin's doing literally nothing, standing there with his stick down. So immediately I said to myself, it's okay. It's Martin Marincin, and we got to expect a seventh or an eighth D, or a guy who doesn't even belong in the league, to be able to pull it off. It's our depth. It's a guy who shouldn't even belong in the lineup if everybody's healthy and if Sandin is that extra level. So you can understand where there's a bit of belief in the group, right? Wednesday, when Dubas came out, was he not defensive? Like, he didn't really say anything they needed to fix defensively. He
Well,
just cut. Go ahead.
sorry, I want to, before we get into the Dubas press conference, and we'll get into that next. I just wanted to finish on that Foodie goal.
Okay.
And I get that Marincin needed to
Just something,
commit,
anything, man.
do something, commit on that, but
Anything.
let's just get back to Frederik Andersen. Let's break this goal down, okay? So Foodie is below the goal line. He's in the corner. Goaltender position on that is like this. You're hugging the post. You're deep inside your own net. The entire fucking team leaves, and now what's Freddie supposed to do? The guy skates out, and he's got a shot at Frederik Andersen deep in his own net. There's no way he can stop that puck.
Again,
No way.
Freddie's only deep. He's only deep because Marty doesn't do anything. Because if Marty had gone to either one of those guys,
Like, I'm not blaming Fred. Don't get me wrong.
That's what
He's
I'm
in the
saying.
right position. But if the whole team didn't leave the goddamn ice,
Yep.
then Frederik Andersen being deep in the net wouldn't have mattered because the shot wouldn't have gone on net.
And that's why I say I can't get upset. Like, I'm like, well, we're relying on the depth defenseman to cover for an entire four guys line change mistake. Like, he's the only guy back. But I'm like, I don't really, again, it's like, what have you done for me lately? Well, first you were the only guy back, but then you did not, you straight up let Freddie get sewered, because that's hanging your goalie out to dry. You literally go to Foudy, or you go to the guy who's about to receive the pass, and let Foudy take that shot, because Freddie will actually come a little bit out of his net and take a better angle on Foudy. Instead, he's literally forced to stay there while Foudy shoots. It's one of the more specific things I'll ever remember from this qualifier. But what was more important to me was there was more game to play, right? That was very, very early on in that game. And it continued. The consistency just wasn't there in game 5. It's straight up, after the miracle comeback that you touched on early, it really wasn't there. And that's where, like, with Dubas not saying anything on the Wednesday, I kind of thought to myself, is he not trying to get fired, but is this kind of the turning point already? Because it's not like yes, his coaches knew, but we've been kind of listening to the media question his kind of approach to the game, how it worked in different levels of hockey, but in the highest level at a certain time when playoffs are a different animal, right? Like, we've listened to him get questioned, and I was concerned. I don't know about you, so I want to know your take, but I was concerned that he didn't really cater to what is the obvious. He didn't say, like, there are guys on the way out to bring in a defensive core. He didn't say what is clearly necessary. And if he doesn't do anything like that, I'm concerned.
Okay, so first things first, the Maple Leafs defensive core should not fold like a house of cards when you take Muzzin out.
That's the
right?
point.
So that's a flaw.
Yep.
That's a fatal flaw. We have now we have located that fatal flaw. Now, we knew the defense was a flaw going into the season, going into the play-ins. We knew it was a flaw, but now we know there is a fatal flaw there.
Well, we knew the
Right?
D was a flaw, but we allowed it to kind of snowball because of the goaltending and the ability to, well, what
Yeah.
used to be the ability to make saves. Now he's a sieve. But essentially, we let that kind of snowball because, oh, Freddie's there to make a million saves.
But it's now made itself much more apparent, is my point.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's an obvious need to be fixed for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, getting to what Kyle Dubas said, I think he was defensive in the Zoom interview with the reporters. And I don't do you watch Tim and Sid?
No, but on Overdrive, he was kind of defensive about Marner as well for kind of no reason. He was really
Okay.
driving home a lot about Marner too. So go ahead. But I didn't catch the
So
Tim and Sid stuff.
if you listen to the Tim and Sid interview, he's much more comfortable. And it seems like he's comfortable with Tim and Sid. So the rapport is better between them, right?
Okay.
So he doesn't feel so attacked. And Tim and Sid still ask the hard questions, right? But the rapport was better, and the way he answered sounded less off-puttish. And even Tim said so after the interview. He's just like, I don't understand. I have to listen to these other Zoom interviews. I didn't listen to them before. I just got the cliff notes, and I didn't hear him how he responded. But he did not respond to us in that manner.
Well,
So
did he say to them, I'm going to make trades for better defensive
what
players?
he said to Tim and Sid, very specifically, that I keyed in is you can look to our past trades to dictate where we're going to go in the future.
Okay. That
Now,
makes a
you
lot of
know
sense.
where I keyed in on that?
Well, there's two
Jack
guys from
Campbell,
LA. Just,
3. Jack Campbell,
yeah.
Kyle Clifford, Jake Muzzin, and guess who wants out of LA? He wears number 8.
You think you're like it's already that far? We're already kind of speculating that Doughty could be
I
on the way.
I think that we're looking at LA needs offense. Toronto has offense. William Nylander and one of Janssen or Kapanen for Drew Doughty.
Oh, so you've already switched over to the let's trade Willie. Okay. So and it's based on a rumor you've heard, obviously. So
Oh well, and it's well, no, this is my own rumor. Like this is I
okay,
just now Tim
I like it.
also said Tim also brought up LA, and I had a eureka moment in the car when I heard it. I was like, yes, Tim, me and you are of the same mind. I thought the same thing, and when Kyle Dubas said that, look to our past trades, I thought of LA, right?
Well, here's what
So
I think, Joe. I just think of the types of guys, and I said the two LA guys because I didn't. The goaltending is solidified. Again, kick the can down the road. We'll decide what happens with Freddie. But the two guys that he grabbed from LA, like just think of the style of players that they are. That's what I'm saying.
and
Like,
Doughty fits right into that, right?
sure, yeah.
And you can call us LA North if you want. Do whatever you want, so long as it comes with the defense being solidified. And I move on. I say I move Willie because Kyle Dubas he must have said it in the Zoom interviews because I didn't listen to those. But like I said, I listened to the Tim and Sid one, and he said I would have to be insane to trade Mitch Marner. Insane. This guy's going to win trophies. He's going to win scoring titles. He's going to lead teams. He does more for the Maple Leafs than most people understand. He plays in every situation for Toronto, and that's why he gets exposed. That's why you complain about Mitch Marner, because you see him the most. You don't understand exactly what he does for this team and exactly what he is to the Toronto Maple Leafs until you subtract that.
I hear
And
you.
that's when you realize the massive error you have made.
I hear Kyle there, but then in my mind, I'm like, fine, if you're going to try to convince me again, then we're going to have to separate the style of Maple Leaf here. And based on the contract priority, okay, there's going to be certain types of guys that are like you can keep and you can't keep. And Willie and Mitch are kind of top two in the guys that if you're going to make trades and big ones, you got to move on. So I'm saying to Kyle, then fine. If you're going to defend Marner so heavily, then you have to turn around and let me know who's on the way out. And obviously, you don't just show your hand
He did
because
not defend Willie at all, by the way.
and that's part of my point, but that's again what I'm trying to say is I didn't really pick up on I'm going to make the moves that are that everybody knows is necessary. It sounded to me like that same stubborn Dubas that to his credit has worked in every other situation, and to his credit he stuck to those guns. But I think at the same time if he's telling Tim and Sid, I mean, look to our past trades to dictate what we do in the future. The things that stand out to me are a defensive defenseman in Muzzin and a guy who mucks and grinds in Kyle Clifford. Now, I don't think they need to spend the $2 million to give him a raise and re-sign him. But again, that's kind of a conversation we'll get into in a minute. But again, when it comes down to just the way the media went this week, it had a very Leaf scent to it where I'm like, you're just gonna sit here and like think about how the Rangers treat their market. They straight up wrote a letter and said we're gonna rebuild, and I know they've gotten lucky and they got Lafreniere as well as Kako, and they've hit the reset button. But they built a good defensive core. They got good scouting and good goaltending. But they actually wrote a letter to their fans and said, "Here's what we plan to do." And I feel like it's been a long time since the Leafs were honest with their fans. Um,
So,
that's what I'm getting at. Is Dubas is kind of ignoring the whole elephant in the room. But it makes me a little happier to hear that he's dropped that hint on Tim and Sid. I'm just
Yeah.
interested to see. It's going to be an interesting offseason, man.
Well, it most definitely is. And the Leafs have a lot of value. People are talking about how the Leafs have a problem with the cap, and if you listen to the right people speak, and sometimes it's Brian Burke, sometimes it's not. But there's this thing called cap over capture. Okay, so the Leafs sign their players and pay them in signing bonus. So that means they retain their cap hit, but the team that they trade them to does not have to pay them that.
Right.
So these exorbitant salaries that the Leafs have, i.e., William Nylander, he's been paid a lot of his money. So if he gets
Yes.
traded off, then you have the added incentive of saying, hey, LA, he's a cap hit, but he's not a hit on the wallet,
And
right?
now
We've
what
already
Elliot
paid all
Friedman
that money.
mentioned is there's a lot of teams like they're not mentioning who the player is, but because of like their own internal cap and the way that this COVID-19 situation has taken over every economic kind of pillar, the
And
the way
that's
that
why it's huge, by the way. Yeah.
the way that Elliot Friedman points in the direction is it's like, listen, there's going to be a lot of guys who you wouldn't expect to be available that are going to be available. So I don't know if that's a Doughty. I don't know if that means the value on Nylander's contract, having been paid so much front already, even skyrockets that much more because we're moving into a penny pinching territory for these companies. And I say companies because it's the business behind it. It's not the players on the ice. It's what they're getting paid, right? So sometimes based on what Friedman, or it was actually Pierre LeBrun. I'm mixing up the insiders here, but LeBrun mentioned like there are a lot of teams based on who he's talked to that are going to have to move on from guys based on what they're paid, even though they're in a regular situation they wouldn't want to. So that leads me in, John, like to our next point. It's like the defensive core is still super
I,
atrocious.
I, I bet before you move on, I bet that you could find out who a lot of those big name players are by looking at who's been paid their bonuses already. So if, like I said, if Drew Doughty doesn't have a contract where he gets a signing, he gets most of his money in signing bonus. Say he waits to get his paychecks, then he will be in line for one of those teams probably, right? As one of those players to be moved. Just like or unlike Aho, right? Aho, as much as he's worth his money and he's still proven it in the playoffs. He was paid a upfront, right? So he would be one of those contracts who would be safe to stay, as opposed to someone who isn't paid upfront, right? So that's how you'd be able to tell which big contracts could possibly be on the move.
Right. And so again, we know the defensive core is still atrocious. So it's like who my first thought is who's returning. You know it's Riley and Muzzin, and you know it's Hall based on the extension, and you know it's Sandin. So I feel like you've already got a good solid four to work with, but you can't forget Travis Dermott. So that's I've kind of got him.
They may move on from him too.
Yeah, that's I got him in an asterisk here because when you think about as much as he stepped up and tried, in a couple of times he's been asked to do so, he doesn't he does fit that same mold as what they're trying to move on from, especially because he's going to demand a bit of a contract raise. So you're going to probably want to trade those rights before you get into those murky waters of asking yourself how much closer up against the cap do we want to be. But it's up to you which direction we want to go because we had the big four forward kind of conversation like, ooh, who moves on, and you had to take about the captain, but then there's also the more logical, which we both discussed, is what's going to happen. So do you want to get into the more fantasy stuff first, and kind of, or did you already cover it kind of with the Nylander and Doughty stuff?
Well, I mean, I was actually an interesting thought crossed my mind when we were talking about Dermott. I had said that it would probably be Nylander and Kapanen headed in the direction for a guy like Doughty. But what if instead it's a Nylander and a Dermott? Right, so that you're sending a defenseman back, a guy who's proven to be able to play in the NHL, maybe not at the highest level, but able to play in the NHL, an offensive guy once again to a team that is starving for offense, coming off of a Toronto Maple Leafs team that maybe wants to move away from an offensive mindset on the blue line to a more gritty sense on the blue line, right? And so it all the puzzle pieces kind of slot in together. As in regards to the captain, yeah, I said it was my response to everyone saying let's trade Mitch Marner. right? Because
Yeah,
obviously we
that's
know
a good way to put
the
it.
the logic was Nylander's got to go, right? But we're living in a fantasy world where you're trading Mitch Marner. Well, welcome to my fantasy world where I've traded John Tavares, and I own a John Tavares jersey. I'm looking at it right now. I love John Tavares. He's a
Right.
Toronto boy, and I'd love for him to stay, but he's slow. He's slow and he hits the post a lot. I'm sorry, and I understand that it was magnified in this series, but he had the one season with Mitch Marner where everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, where did this come from?" John Tavares, the highest goal production of his life. I'm sorry to say it. No, I'm not sorry to say it. It was Mitch Marner. I understand that John Tavares can put the puck in it. I understand that John Tavares is an elite center, but John Tavares is also 29 years old in a young man's game. I understand what I'm saying, that 29 isn't young. Not in hockey anymore. We're not talking about guys like Scott Niedermayer and we'll bring up Brodeur again, playing into their 40s. It just doesn't happen in this NHL. We're talking about the end of your prime being probably 29 to 32 years old. If you're Sidney Crosby, you stretch it to 35 or 36, like Ovechkin, who's insane and will play because he's a cyborg. But the point I'm making is John Tavares is on the back end of his prime. Mitch Marner isn't even close to his prime. So if we're talking about trading one of the big three contracts, in my mind, it had to be JT, and he is movable because, once again, one of those contracts who was paid a lot of money up front.
Here's why I thought it was a good conversation, though, too, John, because I look at it in a different way in terms of kind of their compete level and their consistency and their ability to maybe get over this hump that's been in their way. A lot of times we come down to the maturity and their experience. And yeah, Johnny hasn't had a lot of playoff experience, but we've known since day one that he's a leader. That's why he wears the C, and he wore the C in New York. And he's a certain type of individual that I've referenced in older shows, like Clifford, Muzzin, Hyman, and there's not many more. They're the only adults on this Maple Leaf team, and they're the only ones that I can rely on night in and night out because they've got responsibility off the ice, like houses, families. You know what I mean? It just goes beyond being a kid and making $11 million a year and pretending that you're growing, but being inconsistent night in and night out. To me, there's an extra added value. Although he's making 11 million, and as you pointed out, he's on. I wouldn't say the back half of his prime. I'd say he's right dead in the middle of his prime, and it can only get worse from here. But again, like I'd say his most energetic years are definitely behind him. But to me, there's still a level of, with him being the captain, being from Toronto, taking a pay cut to come here. I would subscribe to your theory if we'd maybe be a year in the future, but we had kind of a weird season here, and he really only spent like the one season plus this one as a Maple Leaf. So he's here for the long haul, right? He's here to win a Stanley Cup, and I don't think it would be acceptable. And I don't think it gives you a good name as a GM. There's a lot of ways to approach it, but to ask a guy to be the captain of a team, but then in the background with a no trade clause, ask him to submit a list of teams and tell him we're kind of actually shopping your $11 million contract this quick into the deal. So I liked how when you brought that up, it's good. It's a good kind of answer to why we shouldn't trade Mark, because we've got other guys, other similar contracts that we could trade instead to get similar value before it's too late, because eventually you won't get that value back on Tavares. But to me, I see it as something totally different, where the Leafs are about to win a cup with Matthews and Tavares up the middle. And it's going to take some tweaking, but it's not going to be tweaking up the middle. It's going to be just like any other team. Like you see Edmonton and you see Pittsburgh and teams that are either on the cusp or have won. Even LA, like good teams have an unreal first line center and just as good, if not like a step down second line center. Look at how good Colorado's been with the addition of Nazem Kadri. Shout out Naz, we love you, buddy. But in the end, man, I'm just telling you, I
Oh,
think,
to have a player like Nazem Kadri,
oh God.
man,
But
that'd be awesome.
and I can understand why some people were saying Kadri was fine. We didn't need to spend the money on Tavares. I get that too. But now that he's here, like he's here to win a Stanley Cup, and they're not moving on from him. What's going to happen is it's going to be one of those inconsistent guys. And we just saw after an absolutely ridiculous 5 games by Austin Matthews, he is here to stay. And he actually looks like he turned it up a level that he will not be turning down.
Yeah,
If you
night
just,
and day,
yeah,
night
it's
and day.
actually nuts how good he was. His physicality, his will, like he almost willed that series. Even though the rest of the team was inconsistent, he almost willed that series with the way, just the offensive capability. But when it comes down to it, those two centers are here to stay, and everybody else, I think, aside from Hyman in that top 6, is a toss-up. Like they're gonna probably sign Mikheyev, but then it comes down to those two other guys. The guys making either $7 or $11 million, and who leaves? That's where I can again. The fan base is going nuts on why these guys have to go. I'm trying to be logical and say, well, here's what I would do without it being an NHL 20 scenario. Because I mean, if it was an NHL 20, I would have traded Tavares and 5 first-round picks for anybody by now, right? Like you look at that 29 and you go, wow, that feels like 39. But I'm promising you, it's not going to be until the last 2 years of the contract where we start to like really regret it. But that's where that little mini window is here. And they got to get
Yeah.
something done. Like Dubas is on the chopping block in Tavares's window. And again, like you pointed out, it's not 7 years that he was signed for. It's like 5, and they've already burned 2. So in the next 3, if they don't do something special, it's going to be worse than it looks right now, just based on that contract alone.
So to expand on my Tavares take, the only way you get to trade that guy is if he agrees to it, right? It's
Exactly.
not I'm shopping you. Can you give me a list of teams? It's take John to dinner, have a conversation, see how he feels, ask him how the pressure is being captain, get the truth. Does the guy want to be here? Because you know what? Some people can't handle it. New York is completely different from Toronto. The media is different. Everything is different. The life is different. I understand that you grew up wanting to be the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, but there's a difference in wanting something and then when you get it, you realize the weight of it all, right? So you go and you ask John Tavares if he wants to be here. And if he wants to stay, the conversation is over. But you are obligated, if we're in a world where we're talking about trading one of these guys, you are obligated to go to him first and say, hey, man, do you want to go somewhere else and finish your career? Do you feel you would have a better chance at winning? Do you feel you would play better if you could just go and be John Tavares as opposed to being Johnny Toronto, Johnny Hometown, captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? Like that's where it doesn't go anywhere unless John Tavares is willing to jump on that train with you. Is my point.
I agree with you on that one. And the way I see it, I don't think he'd feel disrespected if he even approached him. But I think the way he is and the reason he showed up here and took the pay cut and took the C and put that on his jersey is because he's willing to handle a lot of pressure. And he actually, I don't think he shows it, but I think he likes it. And I'm only saying that because it's just my own personal opinion. If I was in those shoes, the way that the story's kind of played out, he spent a lot of time, wandering back and forth in his poolside New York, spot before he decided to come here. I don't think a little bit of pressure, a couple of missed playoffs is going to force him to leave. But I agree with you. If he is this, the more chill guy than we expect, then all right, take off then, because your 11 million is going to look worse and worse year over year. I get you there. But again, it's similar to Marleau and his 6 million. Like you're going to pay a little extra for that trust factor where I
Oh
do
my
not.
God, the Leafs paid more than a little extra for that, dude.
And
The Leafs,
we're in a depression this week based on that entire contract, right? Because like basically we're giving up a first round pick. It's the 13th overall to Carolina just for dumping that contract. So again,
and that's not even what I'm getting at. I'm getting at the point of when like the Leafs ping pong ball was the first up the chute. It was there and it hit off both the posts, knocked out, and then the Rangers one went up there. Okay.
don't forget to
So
read.
in my mind, Patrick Marleau's face bounced around twice and was laughing at me
Oh yeah,
as the Leafs fell down. So it was more than that. It was more than giving up the 13th pick. It was basically signing Patrick Marleau was the reason the Toronto Maple Leafs did not get Alexis Lafreniere. That's it. That's what I believe. Plain and simple.
yeah. Look at you just drawing that's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon there, right? But you figured it out, eh? I hear you, man. Like it was funny when you say it was first up to shoot. I thought to myself, Steve Dangle in his book, This Team is Ruining My Life. It's like, yeah, don't forget to read the second installment, First Up the Shoot by Steve Dangle.
Like,
I don't know.
this
Okay, so
team definitely is ruining some people's lives. I'll tell you, man.
the one thing I want to highlight, I know there's a ton of stands out there, but the one guy that we haven't had enough of a reason to keep is Willie, right? So to me, that's the proof is in the pudding. Maybe it's Willie and Dermot's rights because you're making a good point. As an aside, I saw some really silly people suggesting Kasperi Kapanen and Travis Dermott's rights to Nashville for Ryan Ellis. And I'm thinking like you're undervaluing Ryan Ellis completely.
Oh
If you
yeah,
think
you need way more. But Ellis is a name I heard that could be
but
moved on.
you started to kind of again with the Nylander and Dermott combination. Now you're saying, okay, here's a big contract that's actually more valuable under this, behind the scenes than you realize in terms of what's been paid out already. Plus a guy that scored 30 goals last season. Like, here you go. We'll take a defenseman back, please. So I can understand where that might be a better kind of package. But I'm not the kind of guy. I don't like to speculate too many trades until they're more like till there's more people talking about them, and then I kind of like to give my takes on why it makes more sense. But until then, like you're just asking for yourself
We're gonna
to
have
look
a hell of
stupid.
an off season.
Oh, buddy.
It's
But
gonna be
again,
2 months of insanity.
and when it comes down to it, we just got rid of the fantasy conversation because I think that was a smart move. I wanted to ask you what do we get into first, but we move that out of the way. It's clear that like the number one move, if you're swinging for a home run or close to it, really trying to fix things with one move, it's Nylander, maybe Dermott, but the more kind of obvious one is like completely replacing that third line, right? You hear a lot of people talking about Kapanen and Kerfoot, and then Janssen, who, holy smokes, we're going to be talking for an hour. But as an aside on Janssen, I didn't understand why he played in Game 5 there. It really, I was going to send you a message in the afternoon when that came up and go like, what the hell is this all about? And I really think that contributed to their lack of chemistry, forcing Willie to play the center lot. Very interesting set of moves there, but the third line can kind of be replaced, don't you think, with Kapanen, Kerfoot, Johansson, all those cap hits kind of totaling around $8.5, $9 million. You got guys like Nick Robertson and Alexander Barabanov slated to be potentially making the team out of camp next season, especially with what Barabanov can do. I suggest anybody, if you've never heard of this guy, go on YouTube and look up the 11-minute highlight pack on Barabanov. He's good. But the Leafs signed him, right, John? So we've got Robertson and Barabanov and potentially another kind of lackluster contract coming in at a third line center instead of Kerfoot. So don't you think the more likely conversation is how quickly do Kapanen, Johnson, and Kerfoot get moved out this offseason and who comes in?
I don't think Kerfoot goes. I like what Kerfoot did for the
I
Leafs.
kind of do.
He's not Nazem Kadri, and he never will be. I love Nazem Kadri, and yes, Nazem Kadri cost the Toronto Maple Leafs 2 playoff series against the Boston Bruins. But Nazem Kadri was also being coached under a toxic head coach who obviously did not understand the game as it should have been played today. And he may have been doing things or trying to impress that coach in ways that he wouldn't have played under Coach Keefe. So I would have loved to have seen Nazem Kadri stay and be able to play with the Leafs, but we don't live in that world. We have Alex Kerfoot and Tyson Barrie.
Don't you recall before you get into that when I said I believe Kerfoot is like a Kadri light. He's obviously smaller, but he's chippy. He's feisty. You saw what he did in those 5 games. Like he likes to mix it up and get involved. He can put the puck in the net, got good hand-eye, and can score goals. He just doesn't get himself into trouble like Kadri did. He doesn't throw any weight around because he doesn't have it. So
Yeah,
he's
he
kind of
doesn't
like
play
a
as gritty.
yeah, he's kind of like a. I can see where Dubas saw him as a decent third line replacement because he has some of those similar chippy qualities. Like there's a lot of guys in the league that do that, but at 3.5 million, do you think he's a good third line center? Or if they can get value out of a guy making a 1.5 million or an entry level deal, do
Well,
you not do that instead?
you always take value, but you got to make sure that the guy you're bringing in doesn't lower the water level too much,
Like a
right?
Freddie Gauthier.
Because you understand that I believe Kerf got at least 15 this year, right? And
Didn't tell you.
that doesn't grow on trees, right? So you can't just find a center who's going to put 15 goals up and possibly 20 assists and so on and so forth, right? So you have to be careful before you move on. But if you can find a spot, find a guy who's of value to play in that spot, then obviously you move on. A side note, shout out to a Canadian team who can win games, Vancouver 2-0 in the
Pulled it
series.
off. Yep.
Just pulled it off. Bo Horvat. Got
Nice.
the update from Elliot Friedman. Also, side note, Elliot is shaving the beard.
Why? He's looking like a.
He's doing it for charity.
Okay, cool.
So he tweeted it tonight that it's time for it to come off, and he's called out for people to donate to a charity, so that when he shaves his beard off, all the money's going to, I believe, Steve Ludzik's charity.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember Ludsey, but he was on the score and former athlete.
Yep, I
Yeah.
recognize the name.
So yeah, the beard's going to be gone soon for people who are not a fan of the Elliot Friedman beard. But yeah, no, getting back to Kerfoot, I think he's of value, but he may be he may be a decent trade piece. So it really depends on where the Leafs want to move. I think you're going to see more. You could. I do think you see both Kapanen and Janssen gone because I think you want a new identity as a team. Um,
There's two immediate replacements right there. It's Barabanov's job to lose, by the way.
mhm.
Like that's the one thing I haven't said is when you look at the highlight pack, you hear how Dubas talked about him, how highly sought after, and the Leafs were lucky enough to land him. Robertson and Barabanov are probably playing on the third line.
And
So
they're both bulldogs, right? Like
yeah,
so,
that
you
might be a
just
good.
need
It might be a good line.
you
Kerfoot,
put Kerfoot in
Barabanov,
there
and
with two
Robinson.
bulldogs. That might actually work out for Kerfoot. You never know. But the Leafs do have a lot of questions to answer. I just don't think Kerfoot's going to go anywhere. If you really want my
Yeah.
honest opinion, I think that they're going to run it back with Kerfoot. They're going to run it back with their centers. Is what they're going to do.
Because he makes 3.5 and he plays on the third line. I mean, that's decent, but those are the kinds of contracts you've heard in the past. Anywhere from 3.5 to 5.5. Those are the ones that kill you. If the guys aren't producing, it's the worst. So I kind of group him into the entire third line. But just to draw a little, map in my mind, if we haven't traded Nylander and Marner yet, you're still going into next season with a top six of like, the two centers, but you got Hyman, Mikheyev, Nylander, and Marner, right, between Matthews and Tavares. So your top six is squared away. If eventually you do decide to move one of those two guys on the right, I promise you, either Barabanov or Robertson can fill in on a second. Like they're gonna be middle six guys. They're not gonna be first line guys, but I promise you, they're gonna look great on the third line and probably have chances and look fine on it. I'm telling you, you've seen the way Kapanen plays and his lack of kind of compete sometimes. That's not inside Nick Robertson, and I don't think Barabanov is the same way either. We'll find out, but just based on
Size is a thing for me, right?
right.
I think you need size on you need a shutdown line.
So I look
So
at
if
it like
that's your fourth line and you want to spend money on your fourth line, then make sure that you spend money on it. And because if you're going to have scoring, like we're talking Robertson, Barabanov, Kerfoot, let's just say that's the line. And we've already said our top six is already set. We don't need to repeat those. So none of those lines are shutdown lines. Those are scoring lines. Those are offensive driving lines. So now we're speaking about the fourth line, and you have to make a serious investment. You have to spend more than the league minimum to get guys in there who you can put out there 12 to 15 minutes a night as a line to shut it down when a team is getting hot.
well, that's where you've highlighted yet another problem because I don't see them being able to do that whilst also trying to focus on limiting their scoring chances on a defensive core, right? Because I think I'm already getting ahead of myself thinking the money that you're saving by moving out Kapanen and Janssen, you're going to want to get guys that can play finally with Morgan Riley. And based on the amount of times we've bumped Dermott from the left side to the right side, bumped him up a pairing, down a pairing, he just doesn't seem to fit in. So you think, okay, like if you have the ability to move out a Dermott and bring in two guys, knowing that you've got Sandin, Hall, Riley, and Muzzin, well, you're going to want two right-handed guys. You've got Riley on the first pairing, Muzzin on the second, Sandin on the third, and I'm assuming Hall to play with either Muzzin or Sandin. So you're just looking at two right-handed defensemen, one that's good enough to play top pairing minutes with Riley, and one that's going to be able to like shelter and show the ropes to Sandin. So I see what you're saying. Like they're going to want to make sure that either their third, their fourth, or both lines are a shutdown pairing, knowing the way that the first two kind of can't play D, minus Zach Hyman. But in the end, I wonder, can they solve both problems, or do they have enough in the organization, like Engvalls, guys like that, who, again, once he got paid, he didn't really seem to show enough. Or Clifford's, who I don't know if he deserves a $2 million raise to stick around when I don't think he did enough for me. I think they might have to rely on a Spezza to come back. Poor guy, the poor heartbroken guy. I
I
don't think
like what
he's.
Spez did.
Me
I
too.
really did.
I mean, well,
I can't believe
especially
I'm saying that after how we started the post game press conference at the beginning of the season when I wasn't
isn't it
too
great?
heartbroken when he was sat. But also I've changed my mind on Austin Matthews, but Austin Matthews has done the work to change my mind.
Yep,
So that's a
it's all we asked from
positive.
him. It's all we asked from
Um,
him.
But yeah, I like what I've seen from Spezza. So I think yeah, you definitely see Spezza back. Spezza could be part of a shutdown line, man. He's got wheels. He can win the face-off. He can break the puck up the zone. He can chase down chase the puck down. He's not the fastest guy on the ice anymore, obviously. Like he used well, he was never the fastest guy on the ice, but he was fast.
Yeah.
He has lost some of that speed with age, but I definitely think you could build a shutdown line around Jason Spezza.
Well, it's funny too. I still remember what I said at the first game. Like nobody owes Jason Spezza anything, right? Like that's when Babcock was kind of still the leader here, and it's funny because how important has he become in Maple Leafs folklore? I will always remember that game four, when the Leafs were down 2-0, and he willed that team back. It took him some time. Obviously, they didn't get it done until the end of the game, but he
Yeah.
fought. He straight up fought. And I remember I sent you a very heated voice message, and I went, "If you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for that guy." Because those guys, it's just the same conversation over and over of young guys who get comfortable, who win one game in a series or have a lead in a series and take their foot off the gas, or just don't know how to close out a big game, or a goaltender that apparently can't win a big game. So it was emotional to see Spezza fight, emotional to see the Leafs lose, and how much he was taking that. But I think it warrants a take that he's coming back for another year under the same. It's going to have to be under the same league minimum contract, but I haven't heard he's announced a retirement yet, and I don't expect to hear it. I think he's coming back for one more year, just the way things played out this season.
By the way, we were talking about shoring up the defense and the offense at the same time, and how it's not possible finding someone to play with Morgan Riley and all this sort of stuff. You know who shoots right? Drew Doughty.
I knew you were going there.
Drew Doughty shoots right. Drew Doughty can play as a number one pairing. Drew Doughty can be the guy that Morgan Riley needs to shut it down, to let Morgan Riley wheel and deal, to have a partner to pass it to. Know he's always going to be there and be sturdy and stable. Drew Doughty has been that for a very long time, and he's a gritty guy. You talk about moving out the money of Janssen and Kapanen, and even a trading of William Nylander. There's a lot of money free there. If you bring back one defenseman and you push everyone back, then you just need one more guy, and you could get that guy. We've talked about it before, a Ron Hainsey type journeyman to fill in your bottom pairing, and then you focus on you already have your third line figured out. We already talked about Robinson, Barabanov. You don't have to pay anyone there. You keep Kerfoot there. Then you take that money that you have saved with Janssen and Kapanen and you put it into your fourth line, and you make sure that you get guys to put on the wings of Jason Spezza that actually can shut teams down.
I'm
There
starting
you
to
go.
I'm starting to picture it. I mean, one of my favorite players in the league is Ryan Reeves. You wouldn't expect like
He
Spezza and
signed an
Reeves.
extension, so
Oh, uh,
with Vegas, so he's
y-
not going anywhere.
yeah, but I think of guys like that where they're fourth liners and they mean how much to a team, right?
Oh man, that's what I mean.
So
Like Reeves means so much to Vegas that he's untradeable as a fourth liner. He's just not going to get traded. It's
and
crazy.
unfortunately, that's where I don't think Clifford reached. He had that
No,
amazing energy kind of boosting start in game two that we gave him all the credit he deserved for. But he doesn't do enough. Where you've seen fourth lines and third lines all over the league that will shut you down, will play you tough, they will grind, and you know what they'll do? They'll there's a fun. It's just we need a bottom six full of Zach Hymans, because I can't guarantee to you that Zach Hyman is the the best at what he does, but because he's constantly playing with Tavares, Nylander, Marner, or Matthews, give or take any of those guys, it's similar to like Crosby, Kunitz, Pascal Dupuis, right? Like those guys are reliable, but if you had like a bottom six of Kunitz and Dupuis, you'd be just as happy too, and they're not making a lot of money. So I think you're making a good point. If you can maybe keep a third line with Barabanov and Robertson. And we say Barabanov with a huge caveat that we don't even know how he's going to play in North America. But when you're a team like this, so cash strapped, and you get lucky enough to sign a guy with this kind of clout coming out of one of the best leagues in the world, you do kind of give him enough leash, right? You think, okay, he's making the team out of camp, and he's going to maybe not be as great as Mikheyev was, but hey, who knows? Maybe a similar trajectory just based on what he's been able to do. And I urge you to look up his freaking highlights because he's good. He knows what he's doing in the KHL. He's mean looking. But yeah, if you can kind of be happy with a third line that grinds as well as scores, Barabanov and Robertson, we saw how tough and how much of a water bug, similar to Trevor Moore, right, that Nick Robertson is. So you get a couple of those guys in a fourth line guys to play alongside Spezza. I see what you're saying, and it already makes my blood boil a little bit. Too bad Freddie can't win a big game.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll definitely see on that. You know what? Actually, I'm glad you brought Freddie up because we got off the Freddie talk and the 1 year thing. I think the Leafs re-sign him, and I think his numbers allow the Leafs to re-sign him.
Like a
I
wow.
really, really do. People, you think that you brought up Bobrovsky, and the money he got. Frederik Andersen is not getting that money. This is where those stats, those 0-8 in elimination games and everything, that's where they come up. That they
Hopefully.
bring those up in those meetings. And as sad as it makes me that they're going to pin that on him, and I've said it's not his fault. This is how the business of this game works. So they'll bring that to him and be like, "Listen, man, we love you. We want you here until you retire, or we want you to wear our jersey
We want you
for
to
as long as you
help the
want
young
to wear it."
goalies. There's young goalies coming up in the
Yeah,
pipeline. We need somebody to teach them the ropes. If you have Freddie
right.
here, doesn't matter if Freddie starts to decline. Look what happened in New York.
So he's making 6 right now, right? I
I
believe
think it's like 5. I think it's one of the
5.
best deals in the world. It's part of the reason why I love him so much.
So he's due for a raise, but I mean, if you bring those stats to, I say the Leafs resign him at 6.5,
So
6.5 by 6.
if they had $1.5 million left over when all said and done in a year, you think it could get done?
Like I just think that I think it gets done before the contract's up. I think they're talking about it now.
That would
I
make
really, if I'm Kyle Dubas, that's the pragmatic thing to do. You get him while he's at his lowest stock. Right now, he's at his lowest stock. We missed the playoffs. We took a step back. As much as Frederik Andersen, I don't believe it's his fault. Technically, the stock is low. So you buy in now. You have belief in Frederik Andersen that he could lead this team. If you build it properly around him, then you get him at the money that you want to get him at right now. And you know what else that does? That gives Frederik Andersen the vote of confidence that he needs to believe that the team is fully behind him and screw what the media says.
that's really gonna make our friend in Texas happy, eh? If they re-sign Freddie Anderson mid-season. Yeah.
Oh man, I forgot the guy's name, but it was an interesting conversation for a Freddie Andersen hater to lay the blame completely at the All-Star goaltender's feet. As much as he had a couple of stinky goals, there was a lot more stinky offense and stinky defense in front of it.
I want to give him an answer too. He actually said, I was looking for the Miracle podcast and I wasn't there. Do you see why we didn't do it now? We've been watching this team long enough to understand what's going on. Okay, there's a reason we didn't record the Miracle podcast because number one, you don't want to look stupid when you know exactly what's coming next. This is one of the most inconsistent hockey teams you will ever see in your life. In your life.
Yeah,
So
until you play defense, you don't win championships.
yeah, that
By the way,
Miracle
that
game
is a number 2. That is a Kawhi Leonard. So.
for sure. For sure. And this team might have a DeMar DeRozan this offseason. It might. It could be Mitch, but I think most likely it's Nylander. A lot of people argued that Nazem Kadri was the DeMar DeRozan. Well, Tyson Barrie and Kerfoot didn't win us a championship. Matter of fact, one of those guys underperformed so severely that that's a whole other kind of, let's do the Tyson Barrie watch this offseason. I say he makes less than $3.5 million. I know he's got some clout. But right off the bat, I wonder if a team looks at his defensive capabilities and goes, I'm sorry, like, unless we've got 5 guys that we can roll out that are defensive, like, we're not signing you to any more than, like,
You know where I
$4
would put
million.
Tyson Barrie? You know who I think might go after Tyson Barrie?
What?
New Jersey. New Jersey.
I mean,
Look at the young defense they have there.
are they
Who
defensive?
model but who model the same play that Barrie plays?
That's not
And
good.
who better, I understand that, but who better to teach them to score? I honestly, okay, Tyson Barrie, not good for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You want to know why he's not good for the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Can't
We're
play
too small on,
defense.
well, no, we're too small on defense as it is. We already have too much of that, right? So if you had
That's
a bunch
my
of
point.
towers, if you had a bunch of towers on defense and Tyson Barrie, he probably would have fit in just fine. But because you've got Travis Dermott, Morgan Riley, Tyson Barrie, that's 3 guys who are basically the same player at different varying skill levels.
Yeah.
Right. So it didn't work here. It won't work here, but it doesn't mean it won't work somewhere
He was being
else.
sheltered on the third pairing with a rookie. John.
Yeah. No, I understand. But my point is he is obviously a guy who needs a big shutdown person.
Yeah.
right? But it doesn't mean he has no value. I don't think he's going to get the contract that he thought he was going to get before the season started, the $7 million deal times however many years you want, blank check, fill it out yourself. But I don't think he's getting 3.5 or 3.3. I think this guy gets $6 million all day long on a bridge deal.
If it's $6 million, I can understand, but that GM doesn't deserve a job. If it's 4.5, if it's between 3.5 and 4.5, it's somebody that watched how his season went in Toronto and doesn't trust it not to happen again. That's all I'm saying. Because again,
And don't be surprised, Vancouver might get in the mix with him too. He's a West Coast boy.
that's where the original rumor was. He's gonna. Hey man, Vancouver looks at how their success is going, and I'm sure Edler getting older and guys like that, like they're gonna need to replace. But I don't think a team that's poised to win a Stanley Cup again, unless you're St. Louis and have like 5, 6 defensemen that straight up can play defense and hurt you. I don't think you need Tyson Barrie because it's people warned us he was right-handed Jake Gardner, and I think he's worse than Jake Gardner defensively. I think
Oh, I'd
Gardner,
rather have Jake. I would have
yeah,
rather had Jake with his
yeah,
broken back playing for the Leafs
yeah.
in the play-in than Tyson Barrie. A side note, can the St. Louis Blues please get swept? Because they have a lot of gigantic defensemen, and I would love for them to pull the trigger on one of them.
Hey, there you go. Well, Pietrangelo isn't even officially signed either. They went out and kind of,
Pareko.
yeah. Well, they went out and made a crazy move in grabbing Falk last, like mid of the mid season. And it's like, okay, you've got a captain here who you haven't signed, and by all accounts, you won't be able to afford him. And Falk has more years on the deal. So, are you gonna like trade Falk? It's too late to trade Falk. So, it seems like Pietrangelo, unless they do some crazy stuff, like there's been an argument or a rumor out there that Pietrangelo's not staying, even though he's the captain, and he's won a cup with them now. It seems like they're poised. I mean, they're down 2-0 to Vancouver, but they were poised to go on a hot run and win another. So I'm curious about that. It's just another one of those defense, a right-handed guy who, if they're available, like the Leafs can't afford that. They're gonna have to move out almost every single bit piece aside from their 40 million that's
Well,
tied up.
the team would have to eat some salary, obviously.
Yeah.
If you're picking up a guy like that,
Well,
you need a
Pietrangelo
little
is
bit
going
of
to be a
help.
free agent, right? That's what I mean. There wouldn't be a team picking up anything. It would be, can you move out enough money to sign Pietrangelo, and then you've got Riley, Pietrangelo, Muzzin, and Hall. Eventually, like that's a quick answer. That's one of those things. If you can, like again, NHL 20 styles, if you can trade Nylander and Dermott for prospects back, knowing that you're getting the cap, trade Kapanen and Janssen, and boom, all of a sudden you've got the money to sign the big ticket free agent, the guy who's from Toronto. So there's always silly ways to think about, and that's why I said I don't like to speculate because how stupid did I just sound there, right? Lots of moving pieces this offseason though. Like you wonder, is it a guy like PK on $9 million who would be a trade in a retained
Oh, no,
salary?
no, 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 no. No, thank you.
It's been brought up a million times, and you're asking about a guy. Again, you move Hall down to play with Sandin, and you've got like a Muzz and Subban combination. I mean, I know PK's had his fair share of
The wrong style of play.
down years, but that's the thing. He's not necessarily an offensive. Like he actually plays hard. He's the
Yeah.
kind. He would be the kind of player like Doughty that like gives it every shift and like impresses you with their like sacrifices instead of like a small puck moving guy who you're hoping doesn't get crushed by game 4 of a playoff series is icing every single bone in their body because the forecheck is too much, right? I'm just talking about guys that aren't just like $1.5 million Radko Gudas, but like, hey, could we get funky? Could we get super funky and ask teams to really retain? Hey, New Jersey's a team that's got zero offense, lost it on Taylor Hall. Would you like Dermott and Nylander, and you could retain like half of PK's deal? Like there's silly, there's still so many silly NHL 20 trades you could make. It's exciting, but where does it actually go, and what rumor comes to the forefront? Is it something wicked like a home run like that, or is it the more likely Kapanen, Janssen, CC's not coming back, guys like that, where your money is kind of back in your pocket and you can sit there and go, all right, what do we do with this?
I mean, I think PK is the wrong move. I understand he's not the prototypical offensive defenseman, but he's a puck carrying defenseman. He's a guy who's flash. He likes to be flash. He likes to shoot the puck. And you've got guys like that on this team already. You need a guy who
Yeah.
likes to separate the body from the puck, who likes to be physical, who likes to be mean, who's got a scout. You need John Carlson. You want to have a guy who can shoot the puck and score. He has to also have a mean streak in him,
Yeah, you need
right?
Victor Hedman. You need
Um,
just grab.
so it's just I understand. I understand what saying you need John Carlson means, but that's the point. This is the kind of person you're looking at, and PK Subban doesn't fit that mold. Does Drew
Not
Doughty
yet.
exactly fit that mold? No, not completely, but he fits the mold more than PK
I
does,
think
and he has the benefit of not having a wonky hip.
I think well, you're right. PK has had some injury trouble and it's affected his skating, but I think Doughty sometimes gets overrated because of what he's won in the past. I think he's a little overpaid for what he gets done nowadays. He hasn't been in Norris conversation for a while. Maybe it's because he plays in LA and LA hasn't been great. And he's been outspoken about maybe like either wanting to leave. Because I remember he signed a big $11 million. I think he's making roughly the same as these guys over here in our market. But he signed a big deal on his own without an agent. And then I believe he came out like either that off season or that next season and was like, listen, like, are we going anywhere here, guys? How come we're just faltering? Are we going to make some moves? Are we going to, it's almost like he's impatient over there. So I can understand where he might be asking for a trade or there might be one that involves him down the road. But then I think like, okay, well, a guy like PK is making 2 million less and a team like New Jersey is essentially like dying for offense. They think they might be able to compete. They've got Hughes and Hischier, but that's it. They don't really have anybody else. So you could fire them off Nylander, give them some defense, and see if they want to send you back PK and some retained salary. It's even less than Doughty, less of an NHL 20 trade. But again, if Doughty wants out bad enough and Dubas has the assets to get it done, like that is, I guess, still an option too.
And he's also got a good working relationship with the Kings. So
Well, yeah. Well, you trade with one team and one team only. Eventually, it's gonna, you can almost guarantee they're going to trade with LA. Like, who else does he even trade with? So,
yeah, well, he traded with San Jose and he got Patrick Marleau. That didn't work out. Traded with Colorado, got Tyson Barrie and Alex Kerfoot. That didn't work out. He traded with LA, got Jake Muzzin, and he got Jack Campbell and Kyle Clifford to a lesser extent. They worked out.
I heard it put this way: Dubas has made
Comfort.
a lot of crazy good moves, and a lot of like a lot of foresight has been involved, and he's been proven right a lot of times. But the few things he's done that haven't panned out have been like atrocious. And you can start with the way that he handled the goaltending, right, with Sparks and Hutchison, and finally spending assets to go get Campbell, but also kind of the way that like it's a it's essentially been one thing after another where you've got this first round pick that's now going to Carolina. And I don't think he signed the Marlowe deal. I'm sure that was Lou Lamoriello that gave Marlowe that money. But instead of kind of trying to bury the money like that same GM was probably going to do if he stuck around, like Marlowe would have had a back issue and hip tightness and not played, and that $6 million would have been back in the Leafs' pocket.
Looked pretty
Instead,
good in Pittsburgh. Looked pretty good in Pittsburgh. I'm just
absolutely,
saying.
but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Instead, what happened was you throw a first round pick out the door, the team falters like a Brian Burke team, and that second, it turns into a Dougie Hamilton and Phil Kessel, right? Like you're talking, Dougie Hamilton and Tyler Seguin for the Phil Kessel trade. You're talking like moves that all of a sudden you look in hindsight and you go, I didn't realize the team was going to be that bad, and I didn't realize it was going to kind of play out that way. So Dubas has done a lot of great things, and I think his track record in every other league shows why he deserves a little bit more leash. But I've started to kind of go with the Ricks and Carls and Uncle Steves that never believed in Dubas from the beginning, and I'm starting to understand why they tried to hit home this idea that you got to have more balance, and I believe that's what the Leafs are lacking. I think if you want to answer it in one kind of word, it's balance. So maybe Dubas and the way that he approached him and said the moves we've made in the past will dictate what we do in the future provides the idea that they're going to add more balance to their roster, because that's seemingly what Muzzin was able to do, what they tried to do with Clifford, right? So I'm hoping that Uncle Carl and Uncle Steve and Rick are happier. But I think Dubas is on the chopping block if they don't win and get far in the playoffs within that 3 to 5 year window of the 7 year Tavares contract that we talked about earlier, right? Like, I think it's too early to talk about trading the captain for all those reasons we mentioned. But you fast forward to year 5 of his deal, and I think Dubas is gone, and Johnny T is probably more likely looking for a new home, right? But again, we're we're totally fans right now, trying to think 3 years in the future when you've seen the way teams like Washington and Pittsburgh, and they had to learn, they had to earn. They didn't. It
Yeah.
didn't just get handed to them. And I think some of these guys that have been paid on this roster in this market, they don't realize how much earning and learning is still to be done, right?
A lot of the guys who got paid less than these guys, by the way, signed for a lot less years. Let's just be honest, okay?
Yeah.
So you can also bring that conversation back to me in 3 years when those guys are now making $4 million or well, maybe that's too much. Some of them might be, but like when these guys are making $2 or $3 million more per year than Mitch Marner, right? Because they're going to produce and the cap is going to go up eventually in a few years once things get back to normal. And then when these guys are free agents after this time is up, it's going to be time to pay the piper, where the Leafs are not going to have to do that for 6 years. Right. So it is a slippery slope, but it's one where I still believe in the philosophy of signing these guys to the term that they
Yeah.
deserved, or that you had to, and they will deserve. Austin Matthews deserves the money that he proved that. He
Yep.
proved that over and over again. And Mitch Marner, like I said, he does more for this team than most people realize. And just because he's not putting the puck in the net does not mean he's not making an impact on the team.
No, but I do buy into what some people say. Like, if you're making that kind of money, you have to be a game breaker, right? Like Panarin style. Like, you have to be dangerous every night.
Panarin
And
doesn't play on the penalty kill.
sure, sure. And again, maybe we're talking value allocated to certain things, but you got teams like Vegas, right, who they essentially have their money spread around quite evenly, and they've got guys that play the penalty kill that aren't making $11 million, and look where they are,
But
right?
they've
So
also got Mark Stone,
absolutely, right?
right,
But it's
who's getting paid to score.
so it comes down to how you build your team, and if you think an $11 million guy needs to be on the penalty kill, well, like go for it. But again, that guy gets injured, and then you don't have the depth because you're paying guys too much. We've seen it happen even on the decor, right? Like you don't have the depth to pay a guy, and all of a sudden Muzzin's the only guy that holds the thing together. So I can see where you put an $11 million guy on the penalty kill, and sure, he looks great for 82 games, but he gets injured in game 70, and all of a sudden you don't have him for the playoffs, and then you're sitting there kicking yourselves that you didn't have Kapanen and these guys that essentially could take bullets. That's unfortunately that's the
Anyone
game.
Anyone can get injured at any point in time. Having Mitch Marner on the penalty kill makes the penalty killers think. A lot of the times you have the only players you have to honestly think about on the penalty kill are the defensemen, because you have not budget forwards, but not your top six forwards are out there. When you stick a top six forward out there like Mitch Marner, who not only can play defense, block shots, but can coordinate a play in half of a second or a second in his mind and get going down the ice, it changes the way the power play constructs itself. Having
But
Mitch Marner out there
how come their
makes it
penalty
difficult.
kill isn't amazing then? And how come they don't score tons of penalty
Our
kills?
penalty kill was fantastic in the Columbus series. They didn't score on the power
I
play.
mean throughout the season, like that's a 5 game sample size. They did look good, but I'm just saying, like, how come it's not a big story how he's a great penalty killer and deserves a Selkie then?
He is a great penalty killer, and it is a story, but the reason why it's not a big story is because it's not pucks going into the net, and people realize what Mitch Marner can do on offense, and they're mad that he's not spending his 100% focus on offense. There's a reason why he's not doing that, because this team doesn't need that. This team has a guy who can put his 100% focus on offense and make the flash. And they've got two of them, because John Tavares, I understand where he gets into the corners and he digs pucks out, but he's not a defensive centerman, right? So, and I understand that Mitch Marner isn't the
Yeah,
definition
you
of
can't
defensive either.
don't
But
start
my
giving
point
Marner
is,
credit for defense over
no,
Tavares, because again
my
he's
point is, Tavares doesn't play the penalty kill either. My point is that Mitch Marner is not putting all this energy on offense because he is putting energy elsewhere, because this team needs it elsewhere. If
well
this team had defensive stalwarts and shutdown forwards and a guy who could actually play on the GD penalty kill, then
they
maybe
have them.
Marner wouldn't have to be there. But
No,
right now, this is where we're at.
I honestly think, John, that they've got tons of guys that could play on the penalty kill, and I honestly
Who?
think
Who's going to shut down on the penalty kill?
I got 3 names for you right now. Kapanen, right?
Gone. I
He
want him gone.
might
No,
not
thank you.
might not be staying, but that's where, like,
The guy doesn't pay attention 60% of the
if you're
time.
asking me in the offseason who the names are, it's kind of a murky water. But let's go back in the season. Why Marner shouldn't have been on the penalty kill? Because you had Kapanen, because you had Kerfoot, because you have Hyman, because you have Spezza, because on any given night you might have
Hyman is on
Gauthier,
PK1, but I think he plays with
because you
Marner.
have Pierre Engvall. So what I'm trying to say is that we kind of buy into this theory here where you look across the league where it's not happening and you wonder, okay, maybe we don't have to be so unique. Maybe we can just try it the right way instead of, okay, I get what you're saying. His value, it's a value conversation. You're saying the 11 million, oh, Panarin doesn't play on the PK. Well, here's the thing. Panarin spends all of his time, like you said, on offense. And if the fans are going to get mad, well, I wouldn't get down their throats if he was making less, but he's straight up paid like the most highly paid offensive guys in the league and then doesn't always show up on the offense. And if you're saying, okay, those games he's playing on the PK, et cetera, okay, fine. Well, we don't need that right now. Willie does enough offensively that we can trade that guy who seems to be great in different areas. He's good on the PK, but he's not perfect every night. He's making $11 million, so we expect him to be a game breaker, but we make this excuse for him and that excuse for him. Get him out of here. Let's bring in a top Pietrangelo, a right-handed defenseman that can play on the PK. And I'm sorry, Kyle Dubas, if he's your whatever award it is for being a great community member. The $11 million is too much, and it always was from day one. They took advantage of being
Every single
Maple
dude
Leafs.
you brought up to fill in for Mitch Marner on the power play are all nothing to a penalty or to a power play, or on the penalty kill, or nothing to a power play. They would not pay attention to those guys. They don't draw the attention that Mitch Marner draws. As soon as he touches the puck, everybody goes to him because they know what he can create at any point in time. There's penalty kill, power play, 5-on-5. Pierre Engvall can't do it. Kapanen can't do it. Janssen can't do it. Kerfoot can't do it. These guys, I understand that they're normal on a normal team. They would be on your penalty kill, but Mitch Marner is so dynamic that he draws the attention. That's why he's out there. He's out there to disrupt and to change the way people are thinking.
There's some great penalty killers that make like $2 million.
Yeah, I understand that, but we don't have them on our team. We don't have we really don't. Those guys are like, if you went and you spent, like I said, go spend money on some guys on a fourth line, a shutdown line, then come talk to me. And we're talking about murky waters. We don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's where I'm saying, like, I get Marner's played on the PK, but I don't think that's where it really he belongs. I
would rather
saying,
a well-rounded forward
he doesn't
as
have
opposed
the
to an offensive forward.
He might have the creativity if he gets the puck, but I don't see them scoring 50 penalty kill goals in a season where it's a story that we write about. It's not something that
need to
is even
score
talked about.
to be dynamic.
But what I'm trying to say is if he's on the PK because he's so good, but he doesn't like create chances, well, then there's a million guys.
He does create chances. Go back. Okay. I don't have the time, and I know you don't have the time. We're both very busy guys. But if anyone had the time to go back and look at the shorthanded goals scored by the Toronto Maple Leafs this year, I would hazard a guess that over 60% of them are assisted by Mitch Marner.
Okay. Yeah. Good call. I don't think many organizations would decide an $11 million guy has to be on the penalty kill. They might say, oh, it's interesting, he can do this, this, and this, and in the time being, like, we should use him there if we need to. But I would also think in that same room you'd have people, I'm just saying, you'd have people that would say, well, maybe you wouldn't allocate all that money to what it's good at and make him play on the offense all the time. And if you're going to spend a lot of time having a guy making that much that's supposed to create that much offense also play on the penalty kill, like, he's not going to be at 100% 5-on-5. He's not going to be 100% on the power play, provided like you actually kill penalties or have power plays. So in the end, I'm like, man, that's the whole point of having a penalty kill specialist, a guy that actually like doesn't make a ton of money, is relied upon to play like a Zach Hyman. And it goes back to my conversation, and you answered it too. If they had a bottom six and a fourth line that was good enough to do that, like, who says Barabanov won't be able to kill penalties when he's a bottom six player?
Yeah, we don't know that. We don't know that. He may be able to fill in. Robertson might be able to fill in the role of what Marner is doing right now. You don't know that.
There's a reason Kapanen was a good penalty killer, because he's fast and he doesn't make a ton of money. And
I don't think Cappy's a good penalty killer. I think that you need to be engaged 100% of the time. Yeah. And that's my problem with Kasperi Kapanen. He's not engaged 100% of the time. I need a guy. I need a shutdown guy out there. He worries me. He worries me that he might try and make a move that Mitch Marner would be able to make, right? And then lose the puck and not break back, hang his head, and we've got a 2-on-1 or 3-on-2 situation where there's a goal scored. I don't trust his competitiveness. I don't know what it is. I just don't trust it. That's why I don't want a guy
I
like that.
respect that.
I,
I
I,
respect that, but
I don't want him out there.
I'm the same way about Marner's like defensive awareness. When you say like I just don't trust, it's like, yeah, man, I get that the guy's so good, but like he doesn't make any of that $11 million for how good he is defensively. So like maybe he can play a little bit of PK, but I don't trust him the same way I trust Hyman, or I trust even an Engvall who's got size and like the whole point of a penalty kill. You got one less guy out there. If you create a box and you have good reach and you keep close to like, sure, Marner can drape himself all over a guy, but like he loses out in size battles sometimes. So like your ideal penalty killer never loses in size battles. They essentially get the puck back, get it down the ice. They don't. It's not like you're looking for offense, but sometimes it happens. You look at teams that have Michael Grabner, again, not a guy that you pay a ton of money because he's a penalty kill
He didn't
specialist.
work out here, by the way.
It doesn't matter if it worked out
How
here or
many
not.
how many
Every other team
breakaways
he's
did
ever
Michael
played on,
Grabner have for
that's
Toronto and
that's my
not
point.
score?
Well, on a penalty kill, that's the point. Is he every other organization he's played on, he's been a penalty kill specialist and scored like a ton of breakaway goals during those penalty kills. So he's a guy that you can actually sacrifice, because if he goes injured and goes down, you got depth that's not coming in and having to play second and first line minutes. But again, like that's the point. If you have an $11 million guy on the penalty kill, it only works until it doesn't. And if you have a guy that's like $2 million, you essentially can swap out whoever you need if you have depth, if you have injuries, if you have a guy that doesn't play great. But if you staple a guy that's making 11 million to a PK, you're asking him to do too much. And I don't think Marner is good enough. I'm sorry to say to Leaf fans, and maybe to you, it sounds like you don't want to hear that either. But I don't think he's good enough. I'm sorry, I don't.
I really think he is. I think he's undervalued, honestly. Not contract wise, obviously, but I think he's undervalued in the eyes of people. I think that just because he isn't the offensive darling that everybody wants him to be. Oh, I understand he doesn't get paid for his defense. He got paid because John Tavares got 40 goals on his wing or as his center. I get that. I really do. But we're not on that team. We don't have that team. We need Mitch Marner on the PK right now because you don't have someone to plug in there. Maybe they have someone next year, and then you can stick Mitch Marner on top power play as he is, on the second line as he is, and he can focus his full energy on being that guy. But right now, the team he plays on needs him to be the guy he is, so he has to be that guy.
Yeah, no, you're right. It all came full circle, but it's like, I mean, the other guys that are in his pay bracket, like they don't play on the penalty kill, and I think there's a reason for that. I don't think I'm off base by any means. So I think
I don't
again,
think they could.
and again, I don't
Not
think
as being not
Marner's
being
as
as
good as you're
effective.
saying.
Not
But
being as effective. That's not saying that John Tavares and Austin Matthews wouldn't be effective on a penalty kill,
okay,
but having one less man out there or one more body to check a slower John Tavares, right? Or to get on top of Austin and make it difficult for him to carry the puck. Marner is smaller, he's faster, he can get away, he can get through those. As much as he can't win the physical battles, he can get around the physical battle and get through the holes that other guys can't get through. So John Tavares, Austin Matthews have their value. Offensive guys, that's where we need them, that's where we put them. I understand that Mitch Marner also has that value, but he can do things on the PK that those guys wouldn't be able to do. That's why they're not there.
we brought him up earlier in the show, but my ideal offensive guy that can also play the PK is Mark Stone, and I don't think Marner is
Oh,
even.
love him.
But I don't. Again, I don't even classify him. Marner gets paid every cent that he's thinks he deserves. I don't think he owed it or earned it this season. I'm sorry. I'm in that bracket. But again, Mark Stone, offensive guy first, right? You think of him, okay, and you have Mark Stone in your top six. You're getting somewhere in terms of offense. You just have to maybe fill it out. But he's also a guy. He's one of the best two-way forwards of our generation. Like he's like Marian Hossa, and that's where I could see him on the penalty kill. But I don't see Mitch Marner constantly turning pucks over. I see him hounding guys a little bit. I see him doing cool things. I see him being super creative. I see him getting 90 points a season like Mark Stone, but I don't see with physicality
He
and
blocks a lot of shots
size.
too.
So does Mark Stone, but I don't see a comparison in player, right? So to me, it's just my old school thinking, I guess. But I don't see Mitch Marner in his physicality, his size. Sure, he's quick and sure he's crafty, but I don't think with his reach or anything like that, he's the best, most ideal PK. So like we said, if they have a bottom
Oh, no, not
six,
ideal, not the best. No, I
no.
wouldn't. I'm not trying to sell that. I'm just trying to say on this
But
team,
but what you're
in
saying
this
is but what you're
situation,
saying is that's
this is
why
where
he
he has to
gets
be.
you're saying that's why he's more valuable than other guys who get paid the same amount of
No,
money.
no,
Is I'm saying
if
no,
you
it's
go
not.
when you go back and listen to this, Ryan, you'll hear me say that he has to focus on being a more well-rounded player, on being more defensive, because that's what this team needs right now.
Right.
If they fix that, then he can then go and change his focus, and the coach will allow him to go change his focus, and you'll
Yeah.
see a different mentality. But at this moment, Mitch Marner has to be this player. He has to, because if you don't have him out there, then that penalty kill is worse off for it. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. If you can replace him with somebody who can do a better job next year, then fine. But for where we were at, for what we had, he had to be there because we had no one else who could make as big of an impact as he was making.
If anything, he's done enough to his reputation in Toronto this season that he's going to have to do everything you said. He's going to have to be unreal on the penalty kill. He's going to have to get 90 plus points. He's going to have to justify that contract.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%.
Because that's big boy, as they say in the business, that is big boy money. And there's a reason why I'm being critical on him, because big boy money doesn't mean, oh, well, if he's not great offensively tonight, then okay, we'll put him on the PK because he's valuable there compared to the rest of the guys making 11 million. Don't you notice how they don't play PK? So he must be better than. It's like, no, no, no. Essentially, we ask him to do one thing and one thing only: get 90 plus points. We could care less if he's on the PK. Matter of fact, I don't want to see him there and in the way of harm, because as you say, he's a great shot blocker. Well, so is Jake Muzzin, and we lose him about 3 times a season to a block shot. So that's part of the point of a good penalty kill, being guys that don't make tons of money can be filled in depth-wise, like a Kapanen, like a Hyman, like a Janssen, because you essentially aren't afraid to lose them when they take a puck to the face. But it's
Well,
like,
Yanni and Cappy both have
this,
$3.5 million
John,
salaries.
this kind of ties into my point. I get Marner might be in a different category, but I see the core, the young core of this Maple Leaf team, and I said this to my girlfriend. I said, you look at hockey players around the league and you tell me what they look like. They don't look the greatest sometimes because they've been through hell. And I said, all three of those guys, Marner, Matthews, and Nylander, are going to leave the NHL when they retire and not look like they played in the NHL. And I'm sorry to say, but that's what it's going to be like. You know how you look at Brandon Tanev right now? He's got one tooth. Look at the guy you brought up, Drew Doughty.
Yeah, Drew Doughty's got no teeth. So.
Look at Couturier. Look at some of these guys that we respect for how hard they play. Okay. Again, going back to the conversation, I don't want to see Mitch Marner losing a tooth or having a reconstructive facial surgery because he blocked a shot on the PK because he's so good at it. But at the same time, I said to my girlfriend, like, these guys are never going to learn that they need to sacrifice their bodies. And I mean, they need to come out of a series looking like they just played a series. And I said to her, I think they're going to retire and look like they didn't play professional hockey. They're going to look like they were businessmen. They're going to look perfect,
But
perfect
I
teeth.
mean,
It's an indictment on how they play, John. That's what I'm trying to say.
I
They don't play hard
understand.
enough.
But you just said that you don't want Marner blocking shots, but you need him to look grizzled like he played hockey. So that's like asking for chicken, and then getting it, but saying you wanted a burger,
I'm asking for the
right?
organic. I'm more asking for the organic patty where it happens organically. I'm not saying you
Like,
put a guy in a position to be taking shots. Like penalty killers, to me, the best ones, you can't help but love how they sacrifice themselves night in and night out and somehow get up and skate away, especially in the playoffs. That's why we love this game. So I don't mind if Marner's going to play 10 years and end up with taking a high stick and losing a two, things like that, or getting physical with guys and end up cutting. Like, contrary to my point, Marner has a massive cut here and stitches on his chin. Okay, so let's slow our roll here. But my point, it's more of a comedic. It's got a lot of hyperbole in there. But I said to Mike, like, look at Nylander. Do you think he's gonna in 5 years gonna look like he played 5 years of NHL hockey? It just some of these guys don't
that's
look
a
like.
compete thing too, though, right?
Again,
Like,
again,
I
and
really,
same
I
with
really think it's a
Kapanen.
compete thing.
Same with
Yeah,
Kapanen. It's like I respect the guys that are going to sacrifice their bodies for this game. And some nights it looks like you are more focused on circling back in your zone and picking up a puck than you are trying to make sure somebody's afraid of you to go in the corner, or things like that. So it just comes down to, like, Marner's dug himself such a hole, and some of these guys are digging themselves out of it with Matthews and the way Nylander got
I
stronger.
just,
Like Nylander got stronger this season
uh-uh.
and impressed everybody.
I just can't agree with that, Ryan. I think that is
Really?
Toronto in a
You're
nutshell.
not just you're not just saying that to be the contrary. You're telling me
No,
Nylander didn't have a better season?
no. I'm not saying Nylander didn't have a better
Well,
season.
then how did he?
I'm just saying that to think that Mitch Marner has so much to overcome now
He does.
because because Nylander played a little bit better because he picked it up from his BS season that he had the year before.
Well,
Like,
it's got nothing
yeah,
to do with Nylander. I just added
maybe
the. I just talked about
maybe
the same in
Mitch
the same
maybe
conversation.
Mitch had a little bit of a down season, but he is way more valuable to this team. People, I'll probably go, or I could probably go and ask 100 people who are Leaf fans and say the name Mitch Marner, and what's the first thing that comes to your name, and they'll say offense. You know what comes to my mind when someone says Mitch Marner? 2 block shots, face first in the playoffs. Lying down there, that is the guy giving up his body. That is the guy giving his all. That is the guy selling everything he has, whether it's putting pucks in the net or blocking pucks at all cost. That is the type of player you need. That is Mitch Marner, and that is not William Nylander.
Then I can't explain to you why he doesn't show up some nights.
He shows up more than Nylander.
But it doesn't. Again, John. Those two are the ones that we're talking about moving out. So we're just debating, we're picking sides, but I'm telling you, those two have to make the strides. So let's back up. All I said was Marner essentially needs to do everything you highlighted. He needs to be the best penalty killer out there. He needs to get 90 plus points and make sure that contract is justified. And I think Nylander already did that. I'm not saying the two of them are going to compete at all, but if for the fan base they are, because we're all taking sides. But I'm saying Nylander literally has done what we asked him to do. He might still not show up, and that's why he's expendable. But we asked him to get stronger, and he did. And that was my only point. So if you disagree, you disagree. But I think you're just disagreeing to be contrarian. I think Nylander had an unreal season compared to the way he played before. And I think a lot of that has to do with how much stronger he got. So again, of those three guys, they've all got their warts. But Matthews impressed the hell out of us in a 5-game season, or a 5-game series. Nylander had an amazing season. And you know exactly how Marner's season went, and you know exactly what's going on with him right now. So I don't need to like
He
argue
also
about
had
who's
John
going.
Tavares on his line, by the way. And let's just
Sure,
like the foot speed of John Tavares is just not there anymore. I'm sorry, Mitch Marner is way, way, way faster. So it's like water skiing. You're dragging a guy behind you the whole time. I understand that John Tavares is an elite level center, but he's not fast. He's
this
just
team
not.
this
And
team is just content. It's a content factory because they'll never be what we want them to be. And when they are finally good, we'll have nothing to say.
yeah,
Clearly,
well, I mean, it's always interesting to talk about the Leafs. That's why, right? Like, and you say Nylander put on size. He did put on size, but 88 looks bigger than 23 on the back. Let's just be honest. It fills the jersey out more.
just look at his season. Look at every goal he scored. Look
It's
at the way
been.
he comes off the boards.
But you also bring up the
Something
amount
he
of
couldn't
times
do
where he
before.
just did nothing, where he put his head down, where he went to the bench instead of battling back, where he just
I'm not saying he
clocked
doesn't do
out
that, man.
like it's shift work,
Yeah, I'm
right?
not
It's
saying he
not.
doesn't do that. I'm saying it's him and Marner and Kapanen. Those are and
Uh,
Janssen, sure, but we barely saw any Janssen. Those are the guys that are getting paid too much to do that. Sorry.
I just don't think Marner does it anywhere near as often as William, as much as Willie had or brought the water level up, and he had a much better season than the season previous. We're talking about the season previous was the season where Mitch Marner had John Tavares scoring 40 goals. So if we're remembering how much Willie grew, let's not forget that Mitch Marner is, as much as he may have had a down season, it wasn't that far down from where he came
Oh,
from.
it's a tale
So
of
it's
two
a
opposites.
fluctuation.
It's essentially a tale of two opposites. You've got one really low bar that was surpassed by so far that we've seen incredible improvements from Nylander, more than you'd expect. I'm not trying to say that he dedicates himself to the game. I just pointed out I don't think he's going to look any different after having played an entire career. I think that's the way he plays. He's Phil Kessel's 2.0. But Phil Kessel even himself had some dad strength, they call it, right? Even though he looked kind of like a milk bag, he essentially can handle himself. He can come off the wall and a guy's draped all over him and still find his way to the net with the puck. There's plenty of games this season where I said to myself, that's what we're talking about, Willie. When he comes off the boards and there's guys, he's literally drawing holding penalties because guys can't keep up to him and can't knock him down. That's all I'm talking about. But the tale of two opposites happens when Marner sets such an incredibly high bar, especially you keep highlighting the season he gifted to Tavares. Well, then how come it wasn't the same this season? I don't have the answer. You don't have the answer, but that's the whole I'm talking about.
Foot speed.
Next season coming, I'm talking about Marner, but next season coming up, there's a lot to prove. and essentially everybody but to me, everybody except Hyman, Tavares, and Matthews are on the chopping block. So if you can't sign Mikheyev and you have a better option, go for it. I doubt it, but Marner and Nylander are your two biggest conversations. If you
No,
essentially
Mikheyev is definitely getting signed for sure,
exactly,
1,000,000%.
and I think it's less likely. I'm with you. I think it's less likely Marner gets traded, but again, there are plenty of people with a million good reasons why both could go. So that's all we're trying to do on the show is basically explain the left and the right of it. I'm not trying to take a side. I'm trying
Yeah,
to say I think both of them have really different play styles. I think one of them improved tremendously from the way that we perceived, and the other one was nowhere to be found. Especially, and again, his game 2 to 5 was fine, but he's not making entry level deal any money anymore. He's making $11 million. So it's similar to the Tavares conversation too. Okay, he had 1 year of that, and that's how it looked. So maybe it's a little too soon to be trading Marner, but if he has another year of that, and we fast forward to this point next year, and we're having the same conversations of, oh well, he can still play on the PK, even though he didn't get 90 points this season. Let's look who he's playing with, and all these excuses. It's like, no. You look around the league, and we don't make excuses for Nathan McKinnon. We don't make excuses for any of these guys that are making less money than you. So do it or get out.
Nate McKinnon is making less money because of a
Sure,
bad season and a
your
lucky
argument
signing.
is, John. Whatever your argument is, I'll find 30 other teams and give you a better
I'm
contract
just
that gives
saying.
you
I'm
the
just
same.
saying. Nate McKinnon specifically, he
Yeah,
had a he had a raw deal because he had a really bad season, and they signed him to a long term deal, and then he blew up.
yep,
Like he got
he did.
way better. And I mean, okay, so the last thing I gotta say on the Marner situation here. Okay, so yes, did Marner take a step back? Yes, he did take a step back, right? But the reason I bring up the foot speed is Marner, if he takes a step back and then Tavares loses foot speed, as he will every single year as he gets older, he's going to lose foot speed. So Marner takes a step back and then Tavares loses foot speed. The chasm becomes bigger. It's not just on 16. Did he take a step back? Yes.
How
But
fast did Jason Spezza look at 37 years old? I just want
he's
you.
faster than Tavares.
Okay,
He
but
he
like,
is. He just
how
is.
fast does does Joe Thornton not
Joe
have a job in the
Thornton,
NHL anymore?
I don't think he will, to be honest with you.
Okay, and
I,
how old
I
is he?
really, I really don't. He's ancient. But my point
I'm trying
is
to point out I'm not worried about Tavares' age or foot speed at all for another
my
couple of seasons.
yeah. But my point is you're wondering why Mitch Marner's um, uh, uh, regression is so great. It is not just solely based on Mitch Marner. It's based on the fact that year one he had not only year one of John Tavares, where John Tavares would have been 100% jacked up to be playing for his home team and trying to make the best impression that you can possibly make. Tell me you don't do that at the start of a job, because everybody does it. Everyone does it when you move. You give your highlight reel self, you give your best self, and that's what John Tavares did for year one.
Yeah, but
And he got the best of Mitch Marner. And now we've got a step back from John Tavares and a step back from Mitch Marner, and it's all being thrown on 16.
I'm losing you.
And I'm
Oh,
sick
there we
of
go.
it.
Yeah, it's not all on 16, but again, I think it goes back to the way I perceive these guys on and off the ice. Like 16, what does he do when he goes home? He's a kid, man, and so
Yeah,
am
he
I.
plays Fortnite probably.
Yeah, and so am I. And as much as I have responsibility and need to own up to it, I haven't yet. And until I got my ass against the grain, or against the saw, whatever it is, like, I'm not going to. And I know that Tavares is, because he's an adult and he has a house and he has a kid. He has responsibilities off the ice that force him into a different mindset. And I think part of the Leafs' inconsistencies and the reason why they can't hold leads, the reason why they just fall apart at times, is just because they're young. And to them, this is still just a game. It's not a job. They might be getting paid, but it's a game. It's a game they played their whole life and been really damn good at it one way. And when they get taught and told to do something, they know better. I've given you my dishes analogy all the time. Don, there's dishes right behind me. They always tell me, bring the dishes up. I know, I got to get better. Like, until I got my own house, I'm not going to do it. I'm lazy and I'm a kid and I take advantage. And these guys are in the same age group. That's what it is. So to me, I kind of trust Tavares. I just trust him regardless of foot speed or anything. I trust him. He's the captain of the team and he cares. And I'm not saying the guys that are making the money and don't show up don't care, but I'm saying they don't seem to have that. It hasn't completely clicked for them that, like, the fan base, we don't relate. We can't relate to those guys because, number one, we don't make that kind of money, and like, they're not the same hardworking people that the fan base is. That's why we like Wendell Clark and Doug Gilmore, and like why we loved all the Darcy Tucker, Ty Domi, because we can relate to those guys, right? Like some nights you just think, wow, like they're just fighting to stay in the league, or they're just fighting to turn the tide of the game. Even though they're not the most skilled out there, they're doing everything they can. And it's like, on the contrary, we don't relate to three guys who are so highly skilled and so elite, and yet just like treat it like it's a game. We're like, no, this isn't a game to us. We're Leaf fans, right? So I just think some of these guys, unlike Tavares, even though Marner's from here, they're just kind of still taking advantage of being young kids, and I don't blame them because I do the same thing. It's just I trust Tavares and his foot speed or anything like that. It's not a question to me until I start to actually see it. I'm not even going to bring it up until I physically see it.
No, and I'm not gonna beating a dead horse, right? We're just going back and forth and arguing the same points, and it makes for a good show. But eventually we're just both beating a dead horse, right? So to get out of here, how about I got a Darcy Tucker story? You want to hear it? It's a great Darcy Tucker story.
No, I'm sick and tired of you.
It's a great Darcy Tucker story.
Let's hear
Okay,
it.
so 18-wheeler off a cliff year. The year where we were in by 9 points and missed by 9 points. I bought tickets to the final Hockey Night in Canada game of the regular season, Ottawa versus Toronto. I bought tickets 4 months in advance. Toronto was well in the playoffs, or well, 3 months in advance. They were well into the playoffs, right? And I was just like, okay. And as time went on, I was like, man, if they don't make the playoffs, I'm gonna be so pissed.
Oh no.
So time comes, they didn't make the playoffs, obviously. So I get there, right? And I don't know why this happened, but I went with a group of my buddies, and one of them is a diehard Tucker fan, just diehard, right? We get to our seats, we sit down, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go grab a beer, and my other buddy wanted to come with me, so we went. And he's like, no, I'm gonna stay here. So we go and walk on the concourse, and who do we see walking around the concourse carrying his own damn jersey? Darcy Tucker in Ottawa.
What?
Yeah, he was there. He was sitting in the box, and we got a picture with him as we were going to get beers, while my buddy, the diehard fan, was sitting in the stands. So we went back to the stands, and it was like, hey, guess who we saw? And he was so salty the whole night. It was so funny. Was
Dude,
awesome.
I would be too. I would be too. Honestly, I would have been like, yo, you guys didn't like come get me and bring me back here? You didn't
Oh,
tell Darcy to wait?
he was in such a hurry. He almost didn't want to take a picture with us. But
Wow.
when we told him that our buddy was a diehard fan and that he chose not to come with us, that's what made Darcy take the picture. No lie. He wasn't going to take a picture with two grown men with beards. We didn't have a kid with us, right? He was ready to go on, but the little bit of a poke at our buddy made him take the picture. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind
Good
of player he was. That's the kind of human being he is. That's awesome. That is a good story. Well,
Yeah.
man,
So
let's move on from the Leafs. I just want to make sure we cover the stuff that's happened in hockey. We'll get together, I think, probably tomorrow if you're free, and just do our next post game presser. But what are you thinking of the rest of the first round? We mentioned that Vancouver's up 2-0 now after them dusting St. Louis again today. And I like how Vegas has looked against Chicago, but Montreal won today. They did it for Julien, right? The
yeah,
guys.
that's the close Julien effect.
Yeah.
That's 100%.
Yeah, because if anybody's not up to date, he just got a stint put in. He had a procedure done today, but he had to leave the bubble to go to the bubble or leave wherever the hotel is to go to the bubble hospital. And I lost you for a second there, but you're back. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, it looked frozen for a second, but yeah, he essentially had major chest pains yesterday, and there was no screwing around. They had to put a stint in, so it was a big deal. And you think they rallied around him today, don't you?
Oh yeah, so much so that I took Montreal today before. Like I have Philly winning the Stanley Cup. I have a bet on
Yeah.
sportsinteraction.com. Philly winning the Stanley Cup, got 7-1 odds, which was actually pretty low. There was only one other team that was paying lower to win. So Philly was favored at I guess by this book, or the second favorite to win the cup. So you wouldn't think that I would go and take Montreal, but after they had the situation with Julien, I was just like, oh, I went right there. I was like, I'm putting money on this Montreal game. I'm putting money on Montreal to come out and to win, and that's exactly what they did today.
Dominated them.
Yeah, they dominated. They made Carter Hart look like he wasn't an NHL caliber goaltender. They made it look like they didn't have any problems on offense. And I'm going to be honest, not that they can do it, but if Montreal does that, I mean, are we talking about a Stanley Cup in like red and blue and white?
Don't go that far. Don't you dare go that far. I was really surprised to see in game one, Philly just pulled it off. I think it was Dave Poulin or somebody was bringing that up, and I'm like, yeah, I saw the same thing, man. Philly was doing well, and then Montreal storms back, and they just squeaked by. So like, in the end, Philly is lucky to have one win in this series. After the way Montreal took the boost to them today, and I'm thinking to myself like, when did Montreal get good? Like they're not good, right? They're not a good hockey team. They're not, but it's just like everybody else. They're balanced and they got guys that actually care. And right now they care for more than just themselves. They care about their coach. So there's a real rallying effect to today's score. Who knows how long they carry on and like go
Dude,
with this.
let's be honest. If you could pick one goaltender in the entire league, you've got one pick. Stanley Cup, Game 7. Who's your goaltender?
Based on that criteria, anybody but Freddie Andersen.
Honestly,
Carey Price.
who's your goalie? Yeah, and that's what Montreal's riding. As much as Montreal has been able to put some goals in the net and make some plays defensively, what Montreal is riding right now is an unreal goaltender, and that can win you a Stanley Cup.
Yeah,
We've seen it before, and I know they've got a long road to go, and a treacherous one that it's very easy to fall off the wayside. But we weren't talking about St. Louis as Stanley Cup champions a year ago, or a year and a bit ago,
That's
right?
true.
We weren't talking about Jordan Binnington as this unreal goaltender who carried his team to the Stanley Cup Finals and the Stanley Cup championship, right? Like we just weren't. So we could be in October talking about a Montreal Canadian Stanley Cup final where Carey Price was the difference maker.
That's crazy. I don't think personally that they've got enough. I really don't, because
Coming from a guy who bet on Philly, I'm just saying.
yeah, they're gonna have to go up against like teams like Washington, Tampa Bay, Philly, one of those guys. Like even if Boston moves on, if not Carolina, like we're talking good hockey teams. So in the end, I don't see Montreal sticking with it, just because with a team like St. Louis, you kind of knew they had a little bit of offensive firepower. Like Ryan O'Reilly drove that team, and I think he won the Conn Smythe. He was unreal. But they had on some great players, so it's a little different where Montreal's got an aging Shea Weber who's played like he's 25,
Yeah, just
like
played insane, by the
all
way.
playoffs. He saved a huge
Nice.
goal for Carey Price today too. Like Price gets a shutout, but half of it could be credited, or at least a third of it could be credited to Weber. Big save. But again, they got guys who they're playing out of their minds right now. There might be a little bit of an extra factor with Julian, and it'd be cool to see some Habs fans take the boots to me even further, because they've pretty much said everything they can say by now. The way the Leafs operate and the fact that they're still in the playoffs, I've heard enough of it. But I don't see it happening. You answered my question. Who do you for coming out of the East? But who do you have coming out of the West playing against Philadelphia in that final?
Who did I take in my bracket? Was it Vegas? I'm
I
trying to remember who I
wouldn't be
had in my.
surprised.
No, I think I had St. Louis.
Okay.
I think, but obviously I don't think it's going to happen now with what Vancouver's been able to do. Unless St. Louis has like a coming or like a massive turnaround, I just think that snowball effect. It might just become too much for St. Louis to get the traction to get the series. But I think I did have, it was either St. Louis or Vegas coming out of the West, but I had Philly winning the cup. So
Lots of 2-0 series. The other team that I thought you might have coming out of the West is Colorado, because the way they've just, man, they're a good team. They took the boost to Arizona for the second time today, but Kadri, man, like I kind of want to see Naz and Kadri go to a cup final. Thank you, froze.
Oh well, no,
okay.
I didn't freeze. No, sorry, I was just reading something on Twitter. Yeah, well, I mean, I'd love to see Naz go there with Colorado. Of course, I'd love to see it. And any guy who I've cheered for, who wore the blue and white, I love seeing them have success. As much as I hated seeing Phil Kessel win Stanley Cups, I knew he was going to do it, and I was happy for the guy. Right? It just is what it is. Anyone but Dion Phaneuf, we're glad he didn't win one, because yeah. Anyway, I don't have a reason why Colorado couldn't be there, except for maybe the goaltender. Is that as sturdy of a? Is it Grubauer and Varlamov still?
Definitely Grubauer. That's who played today. I forget though. I'm thinking. I want to say
No, maybe
Varlamov.
Varlamov's in New
He ended
York.
up in
Is
the
Varlamov
island.
in New York?
Yeah, he ended up in the island. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Who's their backup?
I don't know who
It's
the backup is for.
Okay, I can't remember. We'll have to move on. But
Yeah,
yeah, in the end, that was one of the teams that I had behind Vegas. I kind of, for me, it was Vegas, Colorado, St. Louis. Just the way, like, Colorado's had it turned on since the start of the season, and they don't look like a team that's really slowing down, especially because they have Makar coming on the back end. Like, he literally, he's a game breaker for being a rookie still. He's an absolute game breaker, and I wonder. I think this was brought up on Overdrive today, or maybe earlier in the week. But they're one of those teams with enough young skill that the break might not have affected them as much as some older teams, like a Boston, where they might be ready to go, kicking it into overdrive, almost like enjoying being in the hotel setting, like the tournament setting that young guys are used to, being in hockey teams and stuff, like traveling tournaments. So Colorado is that younger mix of guys where you essentially think, hey, they might be more ready to go than a team like Dallas, who they're full of the older, like the Bens and the Radulovs, and just guys that might take some getting going
get
before.
some grease,
Yeah,
some grease to or some oil to get the wheels going, right? To get the
yeah.
joints going. Yeah,
So
yeah,
Colorado's
I
primed,
understand that.
but
Yeah,
I did have Vegas coming out of the West was my team.
how crazy is it? I mean, I don't want to continue going on. I know we got to get out of here, but like, I can't believe how easy Vegas makes it look. Like it's almost just like as a Leaf fan, you're just like, man, like an expansion. I get that they got to build their team from scratch, but when you think of that, they're not supposed to be good. I understand that they made some deals that allowed them to be better than they
Yeah.
should have been, but what's stopping you from making deals? You're an established franchise with established stars, and it is astounding. And I I guess I just heap praise upon praise on the people who sculpted that team because Bill Foley's just laughing. Unfortunately, it may turn around to bite them in the ass eventually, simply because the owner may get a taste for success, and when the failure does come, the quick hooks may come with it, right? Like if you have a taste for all the finer things and then it goes away for a long time, then you can quickly get salty.
Oh, you don't think? Just ask Gerard Gallant what's going on.
Yeah, poor Gallant. He hasn't even been hired again. That's such a strange thing to me. Like I thought that guy would be hired like the day after he
Is there going to be
was
an?
let go.
I'm buying into this new rumor with Boudreaux coming to the Leafs saying assistant coaching job. So why don't we get Gallant on board too? Have Sheldon Keefe as kind of this young, forward-thinking head coach, but his two assistants are literally some of the more gritty old school coaches in Boudreaux and Gallant. I might enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd sign up for it. Boudreaux has signed up to the NHL Network, and everyone's wondering where he might end up. And like I said, Gallant hasn't had anything going on. There's definitely needs to be some sort of restructuring going on with Leafs. I don't know if it's with the coaching staff. I think the coaching staff did as much as they could with what they had.
I think so.
Like Tortorella said. But yeah, getting some grittier guys in there, whether they're coaches or not, may be the answer. Maybe a different philosophy, right? Speaking of gritty, there's a reason why Carolina is so in line, eh? Rod Brendamore, they're terrified of their head coach, right? Like you seen that bod, right? Like, you seen him with his shirt off at
Yeah,
BMO?
yeah, he's
That was
notoriously one
that
of the
was
most
insane.
ripped guys, but I never
Like
saw it. I know he's jacked
he's
beyond
like
belief.
50 plus years old and there isn't fat on him, dude. Like there his abs were like this big each on either side. He's just insane. You don't do anything on that team because Brendan Moore will put the smackdown on you. Literally, he could put the gear on and go play still today. If he
Yeah.
wasn't coaching, I swear to God, he could. It's insane what he looks like.
Well, it wasn't that long ago he was playing. I want to say 6, 7 years ago. He was still in the league. He was just like fourth line center, third line center. I think he still
But you
plays
see
with
guys who
Carolina.
let themselves go. Not
Oh
not
yeah,
very many guys are Gary Roberts, right?
no,
And obviously Rob Brendamore's on that level.
yeah, I feel you there. Well, buddy, I think that's probably pretty good. I don't think we're aiming for 2 hours, but we almost hit the 2 hour mark. So, and it's
Yeah, you
perfect
might even be
timing.
able to split that up into two. Who knows? You'll be able to split that up into a Leafs and then rest of the playoffs sort of a thing if you don't want to put up 2 full hours. Your boy did good on the betting books today. Cleared $200.
That's awesome,
Cleared
man. And
two bills
just
today.
in time to see the start of a back-to-back. I don't. I didn't see if Kachuk was playing, but he was a game time decision. But it's Dallas and Calgary. Their series is tied 1-1. So Dallas gets home ice tonight. Oh no, Calgary gets home ice tonight, and we'll keep an eye on to see
Does
if
that really
Kachuk's in the game.
matter? It's just home jersey.
No, it's you get the line change. So
Oh,
if
well,
you're
I
good,
mean, I
yeah,
guess you get the last line change. And I'm just thinking about the NBA. It doesn't matter in the NBA at all. Like,
no,
not at all.
no, but it wasn't
Um,
until I learned to referee. It was my first year of high school, and I took the referee course. And I played like 10 years of hockey and never once knew about that rule. And then I did the ref course, and they're like, "Yeah, you didn't know home gets the last line change." I'm like, what are you talking about?" And they teach you like before you drop the puck, you're actually supposed to put your arm up, look at the away bench, you make eye contact with the coach, and then you look at the home bench, make eye contact, and then you put your arm down. And I'm like, I just never knew that in my entire life of playing hockey. So it wasn't until I learned to ref, I'm like, okay, home, I guess being home ice, there is some advantage. I mean, some coaches they don't even line match, so it doesn't really matter to them. But you get an old school coach on home ice, and like you could be on the fourth line and play 3 minutes because of the way the away coach is throwing his lines out. You could be like, for fuck's sake, thanks to my coach, I'm never getting out there. I'm not a big fan of line
exactly.
matching because it wouldn't necessarily be in my favor when I played. I was a scrub, so it would be like, oh, well, the good guys are out there, so you're off.
Oh, I get 15 seconds this period. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Dude,
Yeah.
I played a year in single A, and my defense partner kind of carried me. But this will tell you for sure. My defense partner and I went out for a shift, and he got injured about 8 seconds in, and we both came off. And I'm like, that's just the epitome. Yeah, and we're talking young. Like we're not talking, okay, these deep pair play together and these
You're
deep.
both hooked.
It was just one of those where it was like I knew I didn't belong on that team. When Boudreaux gets called, and the funny thing is his last name was Boudreaux. When he gets injured 6 seconds into the shift and both of us are off, like my God, I was stapled to him like Tyson Berry to Rasmus Sandin.
All right. Big card UFC. Make sure you check it out somehow, whether you rip it off or pay for it. But yeah, no, you definitely got to watch it. Sugar Sean O'Malley, massive co-main event. If you haven't heard of this kid, just go to Google, go to YouTube, type in Sugar Sean O'Malley, get the highlight reel, cook it up, ready to go. Best 5-10 minutes. You'll love it. I promise you. This guy is Conor McGregor 2.0.
One sec,
Um,
Sugar Sean O'Malley highlights.
yeah,
All right, I'm gonna make sure to watch that. Yeah, Sugar. It's a 3:17, 3 minute 17, and it's
yeah, and
Money in the Grave. Shout out to
it
Rick Ross
was
and Drake. Good song.
it was great because so there's I got Henry Cejudo, triple champion. He retired after his last title fight. Sugar Sean O'Malley was quoted as saying, "Oh, I get it. I know what it's like when you get your first girlfriend and you want to quit everything."
Oh my God. Chirps of galore. Okay, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, the guy is he's mouthy and he backs it up in the octagon. Anyway, I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah, man.
Enjoy that 3-minute clip. Let me know.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna have it up in a second here. I'll be watching it. Okay, you enjoy the rest of your night. Okay.
All right.